There's a great quote in the movie Pulp Fiction by Mia Wallace. You guys remember it? She says, quote, "Don't you hate that? Uncomfortable silences. Why do we feel it's necessary to yak about bullshit in order to be comfortable? That's when you know you found somebody special, when you can just shut the fuck up for a minute and comfortably enjoy the silence," end quote. But I don't think Mia Wallace was talking about the oceans of silence between Fred and Renee. Because, oh boy, when this movie opens, it's so masterfully done that the silence between dialogue beats is deafening. And I don't know about you guys, but it just makes me feel a true sense of space between them. It's really interesting the way Lynch has created space between these characters by using silence. And I just think that that's the first thing I noticed about watching this movie this time around was that space between them and how it kind of leaves you wanting. And I don't know about you guys, but this is one of those films that tackles it attacks the ego in a very specific way of that fear of feeling irrelevant to our spouse. There's a true primal fear of ending up like Fred and Renee and how scary that must be. I don't know if that's how you guys felt, but that's the first thing I want to talk about, just the setup for Fred and Renee. What do you think about that?
I like to use the word silence because the first third of this movie is so quiet. And we were talking a little bit in the preamble about how good the soundtrack is. But so early in this movie, so much of it is so quiet. And I think that really is setting up, like you were saying, the relationship between Fred and Renee, that there is like so many just uncomfortable sounds. Uncomfortable is kind of like how I would describe their relationship. Yeah. And yeah, it does go to that kind of primal fear of like becoming irrelevant. Like you can sense that Fred has the idea, that things are not good between them. And of course Renee does as well, but like she doesn't care and he deeply, deeply does care. But he just can't do anything to help the situation.
Yeah. It's a pretty scary thought. How'd you feel about some of this opening stuff, Scott? And before that, I just want to welcome Brian to the program. Brian from Kirking Off. We do Kirking Off together. My goal is to have Brian maybe show up a couple more times this year on this pod if he's able and willing, and we can make the times work. But he's been doing Discord watches forever. He's a good friend of the show, good friend in real life. And thanks for coming by, pal. I appreciate it. I know you're a huge fan of this movie, as am I. I like Lynch. You like Lynch. Maaja loves Lynch. Don't know how Scott feels, but
actually, I'll ask right now because of that. Is this the first watch for anybody?
No.
Okay.
Easy. Scott, talk to me, wax poetic about a little bit of this opening stuff, some of the stuff between Fred and Renee.
It's, for me, it's really, really awkward because I found myself in Fred's shoes before in my life.
Right.
Where you realize that the ship has sailed on your relationship, but you haven't accepted it yet.
Right.
And Fred's inability to, I think this, all the silence you guys are talking about and all the like standoffishness kind of comes to a head when he can't satisfy his woman in bed.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of breaks him from there on in. The subtle ways that Patricia Arquette plays Renee in the scenes where she's like, "I'm going to go out to the club. You're cool with it, right?" And he's trying to be cool with it.
I'm not going to go. You mean she says, "I'm not going to go."
Oh yeah. You're not going to go. But she still wants to go. But you can tell that
is that what you think?
She's like, yeah, that's what I took it as. I took she wanted to go, but she didn't. They're estranged now, so she feels awkward going because there's something else going on. Seems some kind of disconnect between them, and he's doing this kind of like he's a live performer. Oh Jesus Christ! You put it on the video where he's freaking out playing the saxophone, but you can. It's hard to be in that situation where you're just. You can't connect anymore. Something happened and you're just disconnected with your significant other or wife or what have you. And I found myself in this situation and it just called back a bunch of bad fears and bad insecurities. And I was like, whoa, the movie does something very easily and very quickly. It makes you feel uncomfortable with their relationship. And that's something that is done with no words. Yeah, exactly. I was like, oh man, I'm like, I've been there where you're like, is this how it's going? Are we just, are we just dancing around each other? When are we going to figure it out? Are we going to get, work together and fix this? Or are we just, it's too late and the ship sailed? And it's interesting to see. It's interesting to watch. But
can I put you on the spot for a minute?
What's up?
Can I put you on the spot for a minute?
Yeah.
You said she says she's going to stay home and read, but you think she wants to go. A, why do you think she wants to go? And B, why do you think she's not going? If that's what you're saying.
I think she wants to go because it's kind of like what she's supposed to do, and I don't think she wants to go because she feels there's the end. They're at an impasse in a relationship wise. At least that's how I took it. And to be honest with you, this movie is 97% interpretation of almost everything in it. So we're all going to have different things.
Yeah,
we're all going to see different things. I don't know. I definitely was caught off guard. I haven't seen this since I was like maybe 17 or 18, maybe a few months after it came out. And I liked it more then than I do now, I'll be honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting, Scott, because I like it less now than I used to. I was definitely like deeply, I got into a huge Lynch phase, and I was deeply, deeply obsessed with this movie in particular of all of his films. And when I say I like it less this time around, I don't think that necessarily means that I don't like it. I very much love this movie. But some of the luster had come off of it somehow a little bit. Mm-hmm. I think partially I used to, maybe when I was younger, I was more like up for the challenge of a puzzle watching a movie, as opposed to, sitting down and being like, all right, I just kind of want to watch a good movie that makes sense, as opposed to like having to deal with David Lynch's crazy fucking dream palace that he creates every time that he makes a film.
You had a Michael Bay headspace for a David Lynch movie. Right?
Yeah.
You're like, just blow shit up, entertain me. How about you, Maaja?
How about
some of this interpretative stuff in the beginning that we're talking about, some of this stuff between Fred and Renee and the space between them and stuff. How can you relate or talk about that at all?
Oh, yeah. I can relate.
She's like, right fucking now, lose your husband.
Nope. Definitely not now. But yes, I've been there before. I've been in the whole, like, this weird tension, very, like, uncomfortable, negative kind of tension between you and your spouse and or whatever. And in here, I feel like there's a much darker undertone than just a relationship going sour, because the more like the first times I watched this movie, I was just like, whoa, fucking weird. I have no idea what's going on, but cool. I really like the atmosphere. And I feel like Lynch often just creates an atmosphere for us to linger and experience and be in instead of a fully fledged out plot. But the plot is there. And the more I started to dig into it and understand what's actually going on, and the more I started to pay attention to the characters and how they interact and what seems to be their state of mind, I really got into, like, tried to tap into Renee and her behavior, because she's being very suspicious.
Mm-hmm.
But is she actually doing anything wrong? We have no proof whatsoever that she is. But Fred is reading into every little thing that she does as if she's cheating on him.
Right.
So Renee, on the other hand, seems to be genuinely afraid of Fred.
Yeah.
And that's such an interesting dynamic, because they both fear and doubt each other, but for different reasons, but it fuels itself.
Right.
Like, it's just exponentially grows.
Yeah, I like that. In the beginning of this movie especially, it's so interesting. It's funny because I took it as she definitely, unlike Scott, and Scott's right, there will be many interpretations, but I definitely took the beginning of this movie as she doesn't want to go to the club. Like, she's kind of done with the club. She's going to stay home. And the consolation prize that she gives him is, you can wake me up when you come home, which is, we can fuck when you come home, which is also a consolation prize, because she's just doing it because she feels like it's her duty to do. And there's obviously nothing in it. That the most condescending, after he blows his load, tap on the back of all time.
I don't think he even blows his load.
He doesn't blow his
No.
load, no.
Oh, you don't
Yeah,
think so?
I think
I couldn't tell this guy.
I got the sense from her reaction that this has happened before. He just kind of grunts and is like,
I'm done.
loses his...
Because he's not into it. Like, they're just kind of going through. But The tap, an interesting part of this movie, which is when you said you think she might fear him, you think Renee might fear Fred a little?
I think so.
I love that interpretation because I didn't take it as fear, but I don't have that perspective. I don't have a woman's perspective. I took it as they're just sort of mentally checked out. I felt like when she does the tap on his back, if you go back and watch that scene again, when she's tapping on his back, the music gets crazy for a minute. And we see his eyes like that set him off.
Oh, yeah.
Quiet, simmering rage. Like when she does it, if you watch the scene again and listen to the music, you go, wait a minute. Is this why this leads to whatever it leads to? And it's funny you say we don't really know if she's doing anything wrong, but there is certainly suspicious behavior. And I think going back to what Scott said, or no, you said it, Maaja, like it's not going to just be some, ABC plot or however you said it. I think Lynch is a true artist and he's really out there. And his movies are definitely really out there. But unlike Brian, who likes it a little bit less now, I like it more now after watching it again a couple of times for this recording. But it is very well done in the beginning. I mean, it's very muted. You barely hear them walking. The sound design is just vocals in a cone of silence with these big spaces between them. And I just think it's great. And that stuff where he is a sax player, that screaming, flashing scene to me was just all of his rage, just all of his inadequacies just pouring out of him as he, thinks about his losing his relationship. I mean, I don't know, but that's how I felt about it. That moment where he's like, oh, at least I can still make you laugh, or he says something along those lines. And you're just like, God damn, this is rough. It really sets the tone immediately. It's funny, this is such a callback to Possession. When I said, have we ever watched a movie where we open where it's so clear the couple are having issues? I completely spaced about this movie and the fact that that's something that happens in this movie. But here we go. So most of this stuff with Fred, the tape being dropped off, all of this stuff. This is what I mean. We don't know what Renee has or hasn't done at this point. We can only guess. But there's this moment where she seems like she's hiding the tape, isn't there?
Oh, yeah, there is. And it makes me wonder whether later on, I mean, we'll get to the whole Alice thing and how much of it actually is tied to Renee and her possible past. But after watching it the second time, I'm like, oh, is this because Renee's past is Alice's past and she's done porn and now somebody's dropping a porn film on their doorstep and she's freaked out and trying to hide it from Fred?
It's very subtle. By the way, Patricia Arquette is brilliant in this movie.
She's so good.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
But yeah, this shit here, if you watch it closely, she kind of just tucks it. She tucks it away and then she kind of lets it come into view based on where he's standing. We know that he can see it, and we're like, wait a minute. It seemed like she was nervous that a tape arrived on her door. 100%, you're right. Like that brings up into question when we get to the Pete storyline. Is there a connection? What is the connection between Renee and Alice? And we'll talk about that, I'm sure. But
it's interesting the interpretation that you're thinking about. And this is how, as Scott was saying earlier, this movie can be interpreted in any number of ways, right? Where you guys are kind of ascribing this to a motivation by Renee to hide the tape, where I almost view the movie, the whole perspective of this movie is Fred. And when he issues the line, I think probably the most notorious line of the film is, that he likes to remember things how he remembers them, not necessarily how they actually happened.
Yes.
And creating essentially this atmosphere of everything that you watch in this movie is going to be somewhat unreliable, and seeing it through Fred's perspective. The way that I interpret the hiding of the videotape is that, Fred has this intrinsic distrust of technology and particularly, video footage, what have you, that his subconscious is constantly trying to hide and obfuscate the truth from him. And this videotape, as we see throughout the film, as you get the various permutations that go further and further and further, this videotape is basically it's a memory. It's a piece of evidence that's shattering to Fred, right?
Yeah.
And that's why it's really difficult for him to deal with it. So my interpretation almost isn't that Renee was trying to hide it from him. It's that, like, it really becomes like, is the videotape real? Like, is it an actual physical object that Renee would be hiding from him? Because it doesn't seem that's the case. When you watch the whole film out, the videotape it's a physical representation of his memory of an event that is his, fracture point, where he goes into his kind of disassociative amnesia or whatever you want to call it. So it's interesting to hear the different perspective. That's why I wanted so badly to talk with you guys about this, because this movie is like, you put 5 people in a room and watch this movie and don't talk for the whole thing. And then at the end, like, have everybody write down what they think happened. And they're going to be so completely different.
Right. So are you suggesting that, by the way, Maaja's camera froze?
Yep.
So there'll be no Maaja camera.
No camera for me.
Cool. The best looking of the bunch isn't on camera. Good for you two.
3 ugly mugs.
Stop.
Speak for yourself, bro. But
Stop it.
I'm not getting no back taps, bro.
Dude. And I
I ain't getting no fucking back taps.
You can't say that when your wife is in the room.
That's true. So anyway,
I'm almost like I made a
it's
mental
sad.
note to never ever do that.
yeah, right. She just
as badly as she wants to. Just kidding.
No, I'll
Dude,
do it as a joke.
all of a sudden you see Dean, he's just fucking thrashing with a saxophone in a club somewhere because of you tapping him.
Fucking bad notes,
got
fucking
the
bad
back
jazz.
All the fucking, I'm going to have a seizure watching him play.
Oh God, the flashing lights too. It was
Yeah.
it was an assault on my senses, both both music and the visual. It's too much.
So
Dude, the
let's get
funniest
into
part
it.
about that
Terrible.
sax solo is that Bill Pullman does not know how to play saxophone, and
Not
he
at all.
did
No.
actually play the sax. The audio is from him.
It sounds
and-
like it.
It does sound like it.
And
Holy shit.
quote, learned that solo for this movie. He didn't learn shit. He just fucking blew into a saxophone while they played a strobe light on him.
It's like modern art where they're just slapping paint on a canvas and
Yes.
wiping it around, and
yeah.
a toddler could do better.
What
It's
key
the
are
same
you in?
thing.
I don't know.
I don't know.
All of them.
What note is this? No idea.
Dude, I'm hitting so many notes though, bro. So cool. All right.
So let's get back to this, because I want to say this. Brian, let's get into it. Fuck it. What do you think we're looking at? You think we're looking at literal things, you're saying, in this movie.
The film?
You don't think that, yes.
Yeah, I think very little of it is actual. I think that what the movie is trying to tell you is that this is Fred's interpretation of a series of events. And everything that occurs between Fred and Renee at the beginning of the film is his interpretation of more reliable events. And then everything that occurs between Pete and Alice in kind of the latter 2/3 of the movie is fantastical, a fantastical telling of how he wants things to be.
Yep.
So at no
Okay,
point
good.
do I feel like it really, like we're seeing anything real.
Right. So here's what I like about this. So let's get into it, because I think I understand where you're coming from on that, because when you think of film, we can think of it, okay, is this an unreliable narrator? Meaning, are we only interested in Fred's POV? Because if so, then anything he sees is subject to his own recounting of it, even if he's not telling us he's recounting it, right? But here's what I will say. The only time I think that gets complicated, or when you might be able to argue against it, because I think you have a strong case, But if I think you want to argue against it, I would point out moments in the film, like 10 minutes and 16 seconds, where Renee goes out. We have no POV on Fred. We just see Renee. Now, we know that this is not Fred's POV. We know he's not watching her. We're observing her decide and make a decision to take it in. We're getting her. Like, so whenever we deal with unreliable narrator, I don't mind it, but that does usually presuppose that we're going to stay fixated on the POV of the narrator in question. And when we come away from him and we focus on other people, there's a couple of moments in this movie where we're focused on other people. And it's interesting. I actually made a note of when they happened because I thought the same thing with the narration. I'm like, yeah, but there's a scene where we're just on Renee here. There's no Fred in sight. Are we saying his interpretive memory is, oh yeah, she went outside and hesitated, and then I remember her picking up the videotape? And do you know what I'm saying? That's why I'm not exactly sure I agree in toto.
No, and I'm 100% with you on that. But what just comes into my brain and I can't stop thinking it is that the videotape, I very much doubt really physically exists because it is a memory of Fred's. So then how can Renee go out and pick up this videotape outside?
Right.
If it's not a physical object. That's not to say that's gospel, just that's how I see it.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
What about you, Maaja?
Well, I think the first part of the movie before the timeline shift is pretty much what happens, except for in the moments where Fred is clearly losing his mind. And I think the element that is up for debate is the mystery man and the tapes, because he's the one filming them. And I think I would say that there is a physical object, a tape, because Renee reacts to it and behaves around it and has comments about it, and they watch it together.
But not right. But that supports Brian's argument, because then it could still be what Fred interprets her doing. That's why it has to be Fred not interpreting her, what she's doing, and what the camera's showing us.
Well, let me ask Maaja a follow-up question. You do believe that it's a physical tape, or your interpretation is that there is a physical tape and because of her reaction to it. Do you think that the contents of the tape are what we see in the film in terms of Fred's POV walking through the house? Or is it a different tape?
I think the first two tapes are real. And because the cops view it, they get called.
That's a great point.
Yeah, the cops confirm.
But not independent of Fred still, which still supports Brian.
Well, yeah, that's...
If the cops are at the police station looking at the tape by themselves, I'd say, well, now you're kind of breaking your own fucking rules, Lynch, right?
But would they...
Well, that's part of the thing that you can't even get yourself into, Dean, is that Lynch doesn't have rules. So there's no...
Right. That's true. Consistency within the film is what I'm looking for, I guess.
Right. No. Yeah. I hear you.
I'm sorry,
but also
you were saying
you're also not going to have consistency because the characters change, the characters their motives change, their emotions change. There's nothing consistent about this film as far as the characters, because even looking at Fred kind of has this schism where he turns into Pete, and Pete is everything that Fred is not.
Right,
he gets women. Sure. He's smooth. He gets all the girls. You know, he rides around in a motorcycle.
He also looks like 5 other actors. Fucking Bill Pullman's problem is he looks like 5 other actors who are more successful. And I like Bill. He's good. And the same thing with the other guy. I'm like, this guy looks like 5 other people. They both look like they're supposed to be the other actor. Like, is it Lee Shriver? Is it fucking... Like, who are you supposed to be, dude? And I say the same thing with Pullman. I'm like, Pullman, who are you? Or who are you supposed to be? You kind of look like Martin Sheen. You kind of look like fucking... So anyway.
Balthazar Getty was one of those people that was like almost famous. You know?
Yeah.
He was almost going to be a big deal, and then he just wasn't.
Yep.
I want to think that Lynch chose them intentionally for that purpose, to add another layer to the character where they kind of look like somebody, and it just makes it even more strange.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, but the to go back to the tape and the police arriving, they sit down, they watch the tape, and I think they wouldn't have, because they're on this case for a while and investigated. They take it seriously enough to see if there's been any signs of a break-in and whatever. I don't think everything here happens in Fred's head. And I think, to go back to the mystery man, I feel like he is... Well, I don't know if you want to talk about him yet.
Why not?
Yeah.
Who cares?
What
We're
is-
there.
what do
Let's
you-
not hold back. Let's just talk. If this becomes that we're talking about the movie because that's how we have to, it's hard to segment this and not pull like the end and like.
Yeah.
Don't even worry about it.
Okay, so what do you think? Do you think he's real? What are your thoughts about
The Mystery Man? All right. I have a thought. I don't know if it's unique. It probably isn't because, the internet. But I had an idea as to what the Mystery Man is to me. Although it's not none of my arguments are going to be sound, by the way, because they can all be dismantled with some kind of logic, right? Unfortunately, because as you guys were saying, Lynch doesn't always follow his own rules. I thought more about it, and he clearly, the Mystery Man to me is somebody who is an aspect of personality to me. I think he exists as an aspect. And what I mean by that is I started to think about this. I started to think he reminds me of what I would imagine Jung said is our shadow. And I don't want to get too fucking out there with this, but I was thinking our Jungian shadow is interesting. I'll kind of read to you kind of exactly how that's discussed without going overboard. But the shadow is something that you have to accept about yourself. It's the darkness of you. It's the to make it to without going into a deep psychological spin on this because I'm not qualified, but it is to say it is a primal part of you. It is a part of you that knows about the dark side of life, your dark indulgences, your darker self. And Jung's position was that shadow work is important because if you completely suppress that, if you don't recognize that you could, with a few wrong twists, be a complete savage, that you have to understand that that's an aspect of your personality. And the way I took it was that he was kind of like the shadowy personality of Fred. I know that's a little fucking weird. Meaning represents, because he's like, me, I'm at your house. I'm here, I'm there. He's there, he's everywhere, right? He's the one with the camera. He's the one showing him the darkness, kind of. I'm not saying Lynch said it was Jungian shadow. I'm just saying, to me, that's my interpretation.
Yeah, no, I don't think he's ever said anything about.
I just like that idea of our shadow selves being subjected to this.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? It's the less moral parts of us. And we have to accept that part of us, or it will overtake us. Like him massacring her. I mean, the shadow at the end of the movie is the one who pulls the trigger on Mr. Eddie, right? Mm-hmm. But I still imagine that that's Fred on some level. But I imagine like like embracing the shadow type of shit.
Is that like part of Fred? Like the part. I took it as that, like similar to that, because when he first sees the Mystery Man, it's in Renee's face after she kind of gives him the tap. Like, do you guys catch that?
Yeah.
And,
when he describes the nightmare.
Yes.
Yeah, and so it's like, is that because he finally snaps and had that simmering anger that's underneath him finally comes to surface, and then it kind of skews off the tangent from there, like he turns into Pete? Or is that why? Is that part of it? Is it the dark part of Fred, like you're saying, like the shadow, the aggressive part, the part that does everything that Fred wants to do but kind of can't muster up the integrity to do, I guess, or the will to do? Right.
Yeah. What do you think about that?
It's interesting. I feel like you're applying this as a part of Fred's personality in terms of like a driving force, where I see the Mystery Man more as an observing force. In terms of, I see the Mystery Man as an interpretation of truth, and here's why: because I feel like the video camera aspect is the truth that Fred does not want to see, that he overtly states does not want to see. And so the Mystery Man, when you see him at the end of the movie, and this is why, Dean, you were saying, like, it kind of seems implicit that he's the guy who's doing the videotapes going into the house and, saying, I've been in your house before. I don't go where I'm not invited. All of this stuff, right? That he is the representation of the truth that Fred does not want to see. And the reason why he's represented in such kind of a terrifying manner is because for Fred,
The truth is scary.
the truth is really fucking terrifying.
For everybody.
Well, yeah.
For
Depending on-
everybody. We can pretend it isn't, but now going back to what I want to say, let me just say this real quick, is the younging shadow, one of the interesting parts about it is that it's everything about you that you reject, despise, or deny. So we're kind of almost saying similar because you're denying a truth, a certain truth in the darkness of that truth, the really dark part of that truth. And one other thing I'll say, and then Maaja, you can go, is that the dream, when he starts to reimagine the dream, the videotape camera angles are the same. So when you go back and watch it, with the way the camera tilts around the room, it's the same exact way it's done on the videotape. When you watch the way it tilts around and points at the bed, it's the same thing when Fred is walking, recounting the dream, when he's like, I couldn't find you, I called to you, and he sees that smoke.
Oh, yeah. If
you watch the videotape closely, the tape follows the same path he takes in his dream. That's why I'm thinking maybe the mystery man represents some kind of truth force. I think I could argue that a Jungian shadow is a type of truth that, when denied, bad things happen. That's the whole point. If you leave it behind for too long, if you don't recognize this part of you, is what I'm saying, what Brian's saying, if you deny the truth, kind of saying the same thing, that it can rear its ugly head. Maaja?
So my interpretation is a little different, but I like yours. Mine is probably due to the fact that I've watched Twin Peaks so much.
That's so good.
Nice.
Because I think the mystery man is an entity unto himself, who is outside of Fred. Like maybe a part of him, maybe a part of everything, like the evil part in all of us. I don't want to spoil Twin Peaks, but I'm instantly pulling up lines from that show and what Bob is.
Yeah.
Because those who have seen Twin Peaks know that Bob is the evil entity, and I won't say anything more about that. But
that's another perfect example of a representation by a character.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like maybe he is the evil in men manifested into this entity who then latches onto people and feeds off of the fear and horrible deeds that they do. And I feel like the mystery man is similar to Bob. He probably is one of the Black Lodge gang. He hangs out with Bob and Mike and all the rest. And
are you saying that the mystery man is an it monster that he feeds on fear?
Yeah, kind of. Because when they meet at the party, he says, what does he say? You invited me. It is not my custom to go where I am not wanted.
Yeah.
So Fred, in slowly succumbing to all these horrible thoughts in his head, these fears, my wife is cheating on me, I want to kill her, he's inviting this evil entity who's then gonna, like, hey, I'm gonna show you the real darkness. I'm gonna film you and show you what you really are. I'm gonna feed off of the horrible things that you do. And then he's kind of like the enemy at first, but then by the end seems to be on Fred's side and helping him.
Yeah.
Helping him get rid of the bad guy that Fred has manifested basically out of nothing. Like Dick Laurent is nobody that we know, just somebody that Andy knows and Renee probably knows. And we don't really know if there's anything more than that there. But yeah, that's my my theory on the mystery man.
What's interesting too is that going back to the whole shadow aspect is that one thing is not always, it's kind of the opposite of what you're portraying. So if you're an evil, wicked, horrible human like Hitler, your shadow might be like love and fucking birds and shit. To be clear, it's kind of
butterflies.
It's the opposite. So in thinking about it, I love the comparison to Bob. I think that's such a good comparison for sure. But yeah, I don't know. It's very spooky, and it's funny that he presents himself at the party right after the annoying, like right at that moment of feeling like fuck her, right? He's pissed off. He's slamming scotches,
taking 2 shots.
Who shoots scotch, by the way? And then this guy shows up.
I like that he comes to Fred in the middle of all these people. He could be anybody, and Fred asks Andy, like, who is that guy? And then it comes up that I think he's a friend of Dick Laurent's.
Yeah.
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 Right.
Which ties it all together, and in Fred's mind makes it even more suspicious that all these, the Dick Laurent and this Andy guy, and now this weird fucking creepy guy who somehow is in my house and answering the phone, they're all in on it with Renee, who is cheating on me.
It's funny that you say it that way.
Yeah.
That's what I think it all
Fred
together,
interprets.
but it ties it all together in Fred's mind. Like it doesn't
Right.
make a ton of sense, but as soon as he says like, oh yeah, I think he's a friend of Dick Laurent's. And that like, you know, just totally makes sense to Fred. But as an audience, I mean, I'll ask all three of you, who is Dick Laurent? Like, does that make any sense? Does that clarify anything for any of us as an audience? No, not really. But for Fred, like, it just kind of makes total sense. And he's like, okay, I can go along with this. And that's what a lot of this movie does, is like Fred making sense of what to the audience is nonsensical.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny because what actually happens and what's interpretive is so let me tell you what my first instinct was after watching this movie. What I thought about it. I watched it, I was like, holy shit. Maaja's like, good luck podcasting about this. and then I thought about it, and then I watched it again, and then I was like, okay, is this a Lynch version? Here's what I thought it was. I thought it was Lynch's version of Jacob's Ladder. So,
dude, that's so interesting.
Let me try to explain. In Jacob's Ladder, big spoilers for Jacob's Ladder.
I haven't seen it.
It's great.
Me either.
It starts with Tim Robbins in Vietnam. He has been wounded by a bayonet in the gut. He lies down and he's bleeding and he's dying. We see a light coming down on him. It's the helicopter coming to evac him out of there. The helicopter picks him up. He wakes up wounded, etc. And then his life is a fucking horror show of weird shit happening. Very Lynchian weird shit happening. End of the movie comes, major fucking spoiler, and he died in Vietnam. His life flashes before his eyes. That's the whole movie. And it's fucking so heavy. It's so heavy. Great movie. Scary movie. Great movie. I took this... I thought of Jacob's Ladder on the second viewing. The moment where he transforms into Pete, I went, oh, he just got the electric chair and died.
I thought the same,
it's the blue light, right?
The flashing, I was like, they just killed him. And this is his life flashing before his eyes, like in Jacob's Ladder. And then the movie ends. And you're like, well, yeah, he's dead. Maybe he's in purgatory. Maybe that's what the road represents. Or maybe he's on the road to hell. The Lost Highway implies like a purgatory-ish to me. But I thought, okay, he just got electrocuted. That's why the guy's head's fucked up. That's at the end of the movie, he's fucking shaking his head like he's getting zapped. And because they make it a point for you to hear you're going to die by the electric chair. So I was like, oh, the second he's in jail and he then he's somebody else, I'm like, oh, this is the life he imagines he should have, could have, would have had based on the life he did have, which was what we saw up until this point. It just kind of flashed before his eyes.
It's such a slight interpretation differential for me between when I watched this like 10 plus years ago and when I watched it this time, because now I see it a lot more like you just said, which is that his death point happens like a third of the, like 40 minutes into this movie. That's what I interpreted
when he
as
transforms
now.
to Pete.
When he transforms to Pete.
Yeah.
What I used to see it as was that he was in prison and imagining all of this stuff. And then at the very end, when he does like the crazy, like getting fried in the car, like
that's him getting killed at the end.
That's him getting killed at the end.
That's what I kind of think.
It might still be the case.
That's what I think.
And it could still be the case. But now I kind of see it as that, like when you see the blue lights, when it first happens and he transforms into Pete, and then you don't see that same exact like lighting effect and visual imagery until the end of the movie, that we're talking about an hour and 20 minutes of film time that really encapsulates like 5 seconds of the end of his life. And this like reel going through his head.
It could go both ways, because like you could see it as like the end when she finally tells him, "You'll never have me," and all of a sudden he changes from Pete back to Fred, and then all of a sudden, a moment later, he's getting the blue lights hit, or he's in the being electrocuted. Maybe that's the end of his life, like Maaja thinks. It could be both.
Like the end of the movie is him getting zapped.
Yeah, it could be, because I took it as him. Well, I mean, I did look up what Lynch has said about this movie, and there's a couple things he's actually said more than he usually does about his movies. I like giving a little bit of an insight as to how he came up with this idea. Do you want to hear it, or is it going to spoil your interpretations? Okay, yeah. Well, but I thought that it was like him. Well, actually, I can't say it because my thoughts were also influenced by what I learned from Lynch.
Yeah. The other thing too is like, time dilation is also a thing. And I'm not saying it's a time travel movie, but I'm saying the idea, and by the way, the story I was trying to think of and couldn't, not just Jacob's Ladder, there's something called An Occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge.
Was that Twilight Zone or Outer Limits? Twilight Zone?
It's actually a short story.
It's
a short story, but I think Twilight Zone did an episode on it. And it's essentially this guy's going to get hanged, and before the rope kills him as he's going down, it's this whole fucking story.
He dreams of escaping, right? That the rope snaps and he runs away with a girl, and like all this great stuff happens.
Yes,
and then at the end of the story, you just see him fucking hit the end of the rope. Yeah,
and it's like
super fucking jarring.
Not to completely derail us, but do you ever have time dilation in your dreams? Do you have like a
100%?
Oh, me too. Me too.
It's very common.
I've lived a couple times what felt like an entire lifetime. I was like some medieval peasant. Then I wake up, I'm like, what the fuck? What is this shit?
Mine is usually weird. Time slows down. I'm the other.
Really?
Oh,
yeah.
Interesting.
Yep. It's pretty weird. But anyway, so yeah, getting back to like all this interpretive stuff. Yeah, it is. It's funny because so much of this. By the way, when the mystery man, we're gonna be all over the place, but that's okay. When the mystery man approaches him, and the fucking sound just goes away.
It's so good.
It's awesome,
amazing.
That kind of stuff is so well made in this movie. Just that
something uncanny
gone.
The sound design is beautiful. By the way, Lynch invited Trent Reznor to do the soundtrack, to produce it, and also in the in the scenes where they're watching the videotapes, Trent Reznor composed that that eerie background noise that they hear.
Yeah, that's awesome. By the way, Andy's spending all that Crow money in his party. Fucking fun. That's Fun Boy from the Crow.
Yeah, Fun Boy.
It's crazy.
Right?
He doesn't look any less creepy with a mustache. He
with
looks.
His
I'd rather bring
Fun
Boy to my Thanksgiving than this fucking creep.
Yeah, this guy's gonna steal your money. You know, he's gonna be like, "I'm gonna use your bathroom." He's gonna go into your room.
The thinner the mustache, the more there's something's
off.
Something's up.
Yeah. Anyone else? I might be old-fashioned, but anyone else uncomfortable with the closeness of
Andy?
Andy's closeness to Renee is annoying. It annoys.
I would have punched him.
I would be annoyed at this.
Yeah,
this would annoy me later at home. I'd be like,
well, that's where I also start to go back into the like, how much of this is real versus Fred's interpretation.
This is what he's
because like, if I saw my wife behaving like that with another man, like even if I'm not going to be like a gigantic asshole at the end of the party, I'd be like, what the fuck was that? Like, are you serious?
Like kind of falling into him.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like
and then she sends Fred away to get her a drink.
Yes.
Dude, that'd be the fucking day.
Here, leave. Go get me a drink while I flirt with this guy.
As I took off. Yep.
All you hear is Freebird, and this bird you cannot change.
But I tried to look at this from Renee's perspective because I do feel
she's hammered.
Yeah, she is hammered. I feel like she's letting loose after being in this oppressive, just uncomfortable atmosphere at home. And they go to this party, and maybe this is something that they do regularly. We don't know. We have no context as to, but clearly these are people she knows. But Fred comes along and like she wants to have fun. But it is still a
True.
bit of a weird moment from her, or maybe she's just so drunk that she doesn't have an understanding of how Fred is going to see this situation.
Her body language makes me think that she's fucking Andy because she's got her back
She's
to
fucked
Fred.
at some point.
Possibly. We don't know that. We don't
Yeah.
know that for sure. And I want to point out an earlier scene, or I don't know where it happens, but Fred is remembering his show, his
That
sax
she leaves
solo.
with him, right?
Yeah, he's picturing it in his head like, oh wait, did I see her at the club after all, leaving with Andy to
Yeah.
the exit?
So
But
Maaja,
as we know,
it's later. It's later in the
Okay.
movie, and
Yeah.
that's what lends itself to kind of being like a fictitious memory on his part. Like, I'm putting it back together, and I think that I saw her leave with him. It definitely happens later. I think it's after this, actually.
Okay,
After the party
yeah.
scene.
yeah, but
that
as we
he
know,
re-remembers it.
Fred likes to remember things the way he remembers them, not necessarily how they happened.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, we kind of explicitly state that at the beginning of the movie.
I know, yeah, but that's just like, yeah.
But it's important.
He starts
Lynch
to,
threw it in there.
That's
That
the
was
overview.
Lynch's life
oh yeah,
raft.
oh yeah. He's like, here's the key. Here's the only key you get to unlocking this movie.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, they make the mystery man look creepy on purpose. They make him unnerving.
That was the
He looks
actor
like death.
himself.
Yeah.
Robert
He's got a ton
Blake.
of makeup on.
Blake thought so. Blake stated to Lynch that he didn't understand who his character was, and that he thought that he was playing the devil, and he had he basically just had no idea of what he was doing. He was just like, yeah, he made me shave my eyebrows, slick my hair back, and wear fucking white makeup on my face, and he was like, I think I'm death or the devil.
I think he chose the look himself and just went to Lynch like, hey, how's this? And Lynch is like, yes, that's great.
I guess.
Can you give them the behind the scenes on this guy?
Right.
Do you know about this guy?
Do you know what
Yeah.
happened
Robert
to
Blake?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
a few
Yeah, he
years
killed
after
his
this
wife.
movie? Yeah,
No.
well,
Or
allegedly.
not
Acquitted, bro.
Oh,
Just
acquitted.
like
well, he was
OJ.
acquitted.
Yep.
Although I don't think the Italians are going to tear up Jersey if he got pinched. So I don't know. Maybe
So
they
Lynch,
will.
Lynch
Fucking
said
pizza pies flying everywhere.
Lynch said retrospectively that he realized that a lot of this film was based on his thoughts on the O.J. Simpson trial.
That's
yeah.
so interesting.
Yep. That's he was very much inspired, like he was obsessed with the case and the concept of how somebody could do such a thing, how somebody could commit murder and go on living with themselves.
Interesting.
Is the
All right.
base for this movie, kind of. But yeah,
So maybe that's the okay. Wait. So if he's saying that, then maybe the point is that Steve is how he goes, like his fantasies, how he goes on living.
Pete. Yes.
Pete, Steve. Who the fuck is
Well,
Steve?
that's what I started thinking, or leaning more towards after hearing Lynch's thought, which is the coping mechanism. It's dissociative fugue or psychogenic fugue is the older term, which is a real condition, a really extreme and rare form of like PTSD, which then develops into a dissociative disorder. And the fugue state is like adopting a whole new identity or like just completely shutting down or whatever to cope with the unbearable thing that either has happened to you or you've committed or whatever. Because Lynch was like, how does this fucking guy just go around golfing and having fun and laughing? Like, what?
Ah, dude. Yeah.
Watching the OJ
That
stuff.
makes sense.
So,
Hey, Twitter world. OJ here. He was having a good old time. He had good content out there, you know?
Yeah.
Hey, you slash a few people up, get acquitted, allegedly again.
He
and
loved
then
to
you're-
make
you're
jokes about killing her, though.
you're
He
golfing.
loved to.
Dude,
He's a regular fuck.
when
He's a
you get
hoot.
to the point that you write a book that's called If I Did It,
Dude, that's a
it's
huge
What?
mistake.
beyond the pale.
Can you imagine his lawyer? What the fuck are you doing?
He's like, well, I was already acquitted. It can't double jeopardy.
Double jeopardy,
Can't say-
motherfucker.
I
I'll
just
write
give
some
me a
books.
new Jew lawyer. That's what he said.
You know what? I'm renaming the book I Fucking Did It.
His estate changes the title of the book after he dies. His wishes.
Oh,
Yeah,
shit.
I
it
killed
is-
that
it
white
is
bitch.
will.
I'd do it again.
He doesn't leave anybody any money. It's just like one sentence that's just like, rename my book. I did fucking
I did
do
it.
it.
That's so funny, man.
So yeah, Robert Blake too. His wife was an interesting person, to
Boy,
say
oh
the
boy.
least. Married 9 times before Robert Blake, and how they ended up married is apparently because
That's
she.
not Robert, man. I'm sorry.
Yeah, dude.
9 times, but I'm working it out in therapy.
No,
Well,
she
I don't remember
apparently-
him being absent 9 times. It's because he was skipping school.
9 times.
Yeah, so she allegedly all of this. I don't know, but intentionally got pregnant by Blake, and then blackmailed him into
Isn't that what husbands and wives do sometimes?
blackmailed him into marrying her, or either doing that or paying crazy amounts of like child support in order for her to be able to see the child.
So wait a minute. She
So-
spits a load into a turkey baster.
Yeah.
Is that what happened?
No.
And then she tries
He
to baby
spits
trap
a
him?
load into a turkey baster.
Well,
Ew. His own or Fred's?
Oh, good Lord.
Pineapples.
Maaja,
Sorry.
can you take us through Robert
Continue.
Blake's failed marriage, please?
yes. So
Make it brief.
I won't go into too much of it, but it was not a genuine happy marriage. He was blackmailed into it and pretty much seemed to openly make some hints about not wanting, like just wanting to get rid of her. And so they go out to a restaurant one evening and come back to the car, which is parked in an alley a few blocks away or a block away, and he suddenly remembers he left his pistol at the restaurant.
His pistol.
Yeah, so he goes back to retrieve it, and meanwhile, his wife gets shot in the head.
Bro. This guy watched Godfather way too many times. he like you're
He goes to get his pistol from behind the toilet.
dude, it's the most mafia shit ever. He's like, I'll be right back, honey. He comes back. What happened?
Oh no!
Like, what the fuck, dude? Anyway, that's crazy. He ended up getting acquitted, but still,
He
crazy
did.
story.
Yeah.
You know who didn't get acquitted? Fred. Bringing it back in.
Nope.
Fred goes to
Yeah.
jail for
Yeah.
hacking up that nice young lady, Renee.
Can we talk about the scene though where the murder must happen when they're home from the party and the atmosphere gets so
It's
incredibly oppressive. It's eerie. He disappears into the dark hallway. And one detail that I want to add about Renee, she's taking off her makeup, but it's not coming off. She's still got makeup on. And I started thinking about like, why is she always so like full on makeup, hair done, crazy high heels she's walking around in? And that's just my interpretation. But to me, that's being like not feeling
Great wife.
not feeling safe around Fred, not feeling vulnerable enough to show herself without a mask
Love
on.
it.
Maaja, you mentioned that earlier, and there's a good point a little bit earlier in the movie that shows kind of that fear that she has for him when the cops are in the house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They separate them like a domestic abuse case
Yeah.
to get like the situation, like just to question like him aside from her. And like, even though he wanted the cops to come because someone broke into their house, or that overtly
And
seems to
filmed
be
them
the truth.
sleeping.
He's like
yeah.
annoyed that the cops are there. From the moment the cops get there, he seems very annoyed and she seems very fearful throughout the whole scene.
Yeah, because I think Fred assumes that whoever broke in might be whoever Renee is fucking around with.
Right.
So his anger toward her is just building up. Like, you know who this is, don't you?
Yeah.
Like, you're in on this. Why did you want the cops here? What are you afraid of? What are you afraid of? What are you trying to hide from me? And it's just builds up and builds up and builds up to that wonderful point of them being home after the party, and he's going into the hallway, and when he comes back, it's over for Renee.
Also, another instance where we get a Renee POV only.
Yeah,
Right.
it's true.
In Fred, Where Are You? Exactly like it's said in the dream.
Like the dream.
Yep.
Yep. It's like Fred already knows what he's about to do to her.
Yeah, the dark hallway, entering the dark hallway and emerging on the other side, the shadow plays across the wall. There's so much.
Yeah, and he sees
creepy
himself
shit.
in the mirror at the end of the dark hallway. Like
right.
he goes into the darkness, he succumbs to it, and what he finds at the other end is himself.
Yep. Yeah,
I love it.
super spooky.
The other point regarding Renee and this kind of her fear of Fred is it's interesting that not only is Fred very different from Pete in terms of like just personality, but Renee and Alice are such like very different characters, where Alice is like the extremely confident version of Renee, where Renee and Maaja, I'll credit you with, I hadn't really looked at it from the perspective of fearful. I always kind of interpreted it more as guilt, but the more that you talk about it,
It could be both.
it could be both, but the more that you talk about it, I kind of feel like it's like she might have had indiscretions that are no longer true. And this would speak to Scott's point earlier about like wanting to or not wanting to go to the club. Like she might be done with that part, and she's not going to the club, and she's not doing anything bad anymore in terms of infidelity or whatever. But she's fearful of Fred, and she has this very reserved nature, as opposed to Alice, who's like this super, super confident woman. I don't know. Interesting new perspective. Every time you talk to someone new about this movie, you get an interesting new perspective.
Alice is so clearly different in such an interesting character compared to Renee, where they could still be aspects of each other's personalities. And it's funny. We've brought up Pete a couple of times. We haven't spent a lot of time talking about Pete yet, although I think that's where we're headed. The thing about Pete is that there's this idea that Pete is the version of Fred that Fred can't be, which just goes to show you how uninteresting Fred is, because he can't even imagine an interesting person. And I'm not trying to be an asshole. Fred is not interesting. And I don't mean that as a knock on the writing, or I think it's actually a brilliant stroke by Lynch and the writer, because the way I look at Pete is just an aspect of wanting chicks want to be him. Chicks want to be around him and people like him. That's all it is. He doesn't.
He's charismatic. Yeah.
But only because the movie's telling us he is. The movie doesn't show any charisma. No. It just happens.
I see your point. It's that girls like him, but what's interesting about him? Can you nail down something that's interesting about him? No.
Nothing.
In fact,
his car.
You could say that Fred playing saxophone is more interesting than anything that Pete does, and he's more than 2/3 of the movie. It's just the fact that chicks are interested in him, and he is actually able to get it up. Is kind of like
there's nothing about him beyond that. And that my point in saying this is that shows you how empty Fred is, because he can't even imagine what it takes. Do you understand? If people, this is a common thing, I think, with incel types, and I don't even think, I'm not even going to go so far as to say Fred is that. He's a performer. He's been with her. I think he's got his own charm, right? I mean, it's Bill Pullman. It's hard to make him uncharming. But in this, we're seeing a relationship seemingly at its end. In Pete, I'm like, on paper, Pete is not more interesting. He's just younger, maybe a little cuter, but even that's debatable. And he has a good car. And we are just reacting on people's reactions to him. That's all we're doing. We're going, oh, she likes him. She likes him. The cute goth girl with the sweater and no bra underneath and the mini skirt and the boots. Perfect 90s girl, by the way. She likes him. He's fucking her. He's fucking Alice. He's fucking... You know what I mean?
Also, he still lives with his parents, who are like weirdly cool, but still have this...
Terrible genes.
Terrible genes. But yeah, they're like cool people, but they still have this idyllic suburban white picket fence home, which is kind of a weird contrast. Like it
Busey
feels...
is a weird contrast.
Yeah, it feels
have
like
your
such
dad
a...
be Gary Busey.
It feels like a dream world.
You know how fucking fucked up a David Lynch movie is when Gary Busey plays his most normal role.
I know.
As a suburban dad with a white picket fence who says nothing all that controversial at all.
Dude,
in the whole movie.
It was almost distracting, because you're just
he's
waiting for the shooter. It's like Chris Walken as the Emperor in Dune. You're just waiting for him to be like, pull out my cock, like you're just waiting for that. And I'm waiting for Busey to be like, pass the coke, son, and he doesn't do anything crazy. He's just normal. And
that's what makes it really adds to the dreamlike quality of this world that Fred has created for himself, because and he's got these cool friends that he hangs out with, and the girl and everything, and then introduce Alice, who, by the way,
upends his fucking world.
Yeah. What exactly about this guy is supposed to be so special that this gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous woman just sees this young, greasy, dumb mechanic at a shop, and then later on the same day takes a taxi in a angelic white dress and stands there like, right. I've come to fuck you because I think you're cute.
Right.
Not in any world is that ever going to happen except in Fred's fantasy world.
Yeah, that's an incel world.
Yeah,
because that's how they would write it on
Fred lacks these things, so that's why Pete has them, and that's the only reason. It's the things that Pete or Fred couldn't get it up, and he's kind of invisible to everyone else around. Mm-hmm. He's at the party, no one talks to him. So I think they show the contrast of how he wants to be portrayed, or how his life is flashing by as he's on the electric chair. He's seeing himself as his shortcomings are being completely taken care of by Pete. Pete is everything that I don't have, even though he doesn't have anything more than just being able to have girls want to fuck him, and he has a nice car and he rides around on a motorcycle.
Yeah. And in true incel fashion, he can't even write a good character because he doesn't know enough about good characters to write them. He just wants his alter ego. Like his alter ego is you desire me. Like I'm Peter Parker during the day, and at night I'm like, you want to fuck me guy.
I almost feel like that's something that Lynch stumbled into without even meaning to do it. But Dean, that was such a fucking great point. The idea that like he's so uncreative that he can't even write himself a compelling.
You heard that Solo. It's dog shit. That's how he writes his characters.
It really, the whole thing with Alice reads like an incel fan fiction, or like a story of, or like a creepy Reddit story of like, oh, I got into this thing with this amazing girl, but then it turned out that she was evil and she was in on with these bad people, and women actually are all horrible underneath the surface, because that's what I believe.
Yep, exactly.
I deserve the most beautiful woman, but then she turns out to be awful to me.
I think we've circled around to your main point, sir, that you are a misogynist.
Yep.
Yeah, poor Richard Pryor at the end.
Oh, Jesus.
Oh.
This is his last movie, right?
I think also Jack Nance is...
Yeah, yes and yes.
Yeah, I think that's Jack Nance's final role too.
Richard Pryor fucking rules. He's one of the best comics of all time. So we have yet to talk about Feech LaManna. He's going to get ratted out and go back to prison on parole by The Sopranos.
Are you specifically referencing that because you knew that I would pick up on it? Yeah.
I don't know. But we just watched, we actually we'd recently watched these eps too. Feech LaManna, maybe.
Yeah.
But no, I like to do obscure Sopranos references that nobody know until I know they're watching the show, and then they know they know. I fucking hit the guy. I fucking cracked him, and that's him in The Sopranos. That's every scene with him in The Sopranos. And dude, man, Maaja and I were kind of pissing our pants when he's having his meltdown about, do you know how many fucking car legs it takes to fucking stop at fucking 35 miles an hour? So fucking funny.
So apparently there's a little bit of a background story to his meltdown, the road rage scene. This actor, I forgot his name, I'm sorry, but he wanted the he wanted the role in Blue Velvet, but it went to Hopper. And he got so mad at that he came at Lynch just raging and cursing and swearing, and then that was the inspiration for the road rage scene.
So he sold him another character.
It was like 8 years later, Lynch called him up and he was like, I got the perfect role for you, you rage case.
I'm going to show you,
Can you imagine? He calls him in and Dave Lynch is like, hey, how you doing? We're going to go with another guy with his high voice. He's like, you fucking creepy head fruit, you three-legged queer, you. Just laying into him.
By the way,
Lynch
he definitely would have called him a creepy fruit and a three-legged.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
yeah.
What was,
Oh, yeah.
Three-legged queer. I don't know where that came from.
Yeah, that's
That's what he would have said. All of those things while putting a desert eagle in his face.
And Lynch being Lynch is like years later, like, oh, by the way, this guy would be perfect for that role.
That's exactly his voice, actually. That weird cadence.
Yeah, I probably can't do that again.
No, but it is, man. That dude, the power of woman on display when she shows up.
oh, perfect music too.
Dude, we're gonna have
Oh, it's
sex
so
when
good.
I want to. You're gonna come with me wherever I go. A dream for most men, right?
Yeah, and most men would not turn that down.
There's something very captivating about it's so funny because Patricia Arquette, I think, is adorable. I also think she's a phenomenal actress. She's great in True Romance, great in this. Like Brian was telling me, she won an Oscar recently. She's phenomenal. And what's awesome about her is that she is attractive. She's a very attractive woman. But you don't, when you go like top 5, look at perfect women, you don't think Patricia Arquette, right? You think like people like Eva Green or people like Drop Dead. You see them and you go, holy shit. Like that's a model that just walked by, right?
I don't know. There's a scene in this movie, Dean. If you watch it, Jesus Christ,
Oh,
she
yeah.
might be
She's
top 5.
But she isn't.
I know. I know exactly
you
what
get
you're
what
saying.
I'm saying.
Of course.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like
it's just like she's not
but
conventionally top model type. Is that what you're saying? But she is attractive.
Correct. But that's what makes her. That's what makes her even more compelling and attractive to me. Is her realness.
She's tangible. She seems like tangible.
That cute crooked tooth is adorable. Like, but not just that. The way she is in this movie, she just oozes a calm, cool confidence. Every movement is like buttery smooth, right? She's soft, inviting, sensual, and she draws you in, but you still see a little bit of a viper in her eye.
That's almost her true romance persona, though, I would say, coming through.
Yeah.
Because in this movie, she plays 2 very different characters, and one is super confident and one is very fearful, as we've discussed. Her true romance character is that like fucking adorable, bubbly, like you're so attractive.
Bubbly, I
because
didn't
of-
say. Right. I think True Romance, she's a lot more bubbly and outgoing in stuff. In this, there's a calmness about her. There's a calmness in the way she moves and her strut.
There's a confident sensuality to her in this movie
Correct.
that is amazing.
Where in the other one, she's kind of like a bubbly, like, yeah, let's pull over and fuck right here. It's fun. That's True Romance personality. This personality is you'll do whatever I want. You're in my fucking shit.
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking about Renee or Alice, they, regardless of the fact that they have very different personalities as portrayed, they do both have the confidence of like, if I tell you to pull over the car and fuck me, you're gonna pull over the car and fuck me. Like they have a confidence to them. Right.
Yeah. I want to make sure you're not misinterpreting what I am saying by saying something similar. What I'm saying is that in True Romance, she's more Jesus Christ, extroverted. She's extroverted and bubbly and boppy like that. She wears pink, for Christ's sakes.
She's more
got
of
the
a
calm
femme
cool
fatale
in
in
this.
this one.
Yes. In this, she's way more calm, chill. Both girls can get you to do what you want, but they're going to approach you differently.
Yeah.
One's going to be like, it's fun, yay, woohoo, clothes off, I'm diving into the fucking pond. And you're going to go, I'm taking my clothes off, I'm in the pond with the fun chick from True Romance. And this, she would be like, take your clothes off and come here. And you'd be like, okay. Like, it's just a different approach. And that's why Arquette's so good, because she can step out, she can do that with 2 different personalities. And I think that's super impressive. She's really, really good, I guess is my point. That she can come across as 2 different types of attractive. I think that's awesome. And then there's a little bit of a vulnerability there too, right? She's very good at that.
I wanted to get at that, like a little bit of a sweet vulnerability, which I feel like is just her, because she had a really hard time with this role. She intentionally wanted to take a role where somebody is like, there's a lot of nudity and sexuality, and because she wanted to challenge herself. She hadn't really done that before, and said that she's kind of a prude and very, very private about her body and sexuality, and it was a big challenge. But she also knew she was married to Nick Cage at the time, And
Oh, shit.
Yeah. And Cage was very supportive of it and also saying like, hey, if you want to work with David Lynch, that's a great experience. And you should definitely. Yeah. So I feel like that a little. Okay.
One Marilyn Manson video and a pistol to your head later, and you're doing all kinds of wacky shit.
Yep.
Anyway.
Yeah, she also said that she wanted to just present a real human body. She didn't hire a trainer to instruct her on how to move and walk and whatever. And she didn't work out and was like, I ate candy. And I watched an interview where she's so adorable. I can't.
Maaja, there are plenty of men and women on this planet who are like, fuck her for saying that. I didn't hire a trainer. She's so goddamn gorgeous. It's ridiculous.
I know. I'm like,
I didn't
she's
even
got
try.
The perfect body. She looks so perfect. I'm like, come on, you didn't even do anything for that.
But to your point, like,
but there is a realness.
I don't want to get too deep into it.
Like
the reason she's
not like
she looks perfect is because she's not plastic. Yeah. She looks like a really very attractive real human who's not trying very hard at it.
Mm-hmm.
That's a more succinct way to try to say what I was getting at earlier by saying she's not like one of these model chicks. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like Trisha Helfer will launch 1,000 ships, right?
Oh, definitely.
So that's like she's 5'10" or whatever, and you know, she walks in a room and people are stunned. She's like that kind of person, and I'm sure Patricia has a lot of that too. But she's attractive in a very different way. Both very attractive in very different ways.
She's 5'1". She's tiny.
Aw, little pipsqueak. But yeah, dude. So Petey Boy.
Reminds me
we
of
have not
James
even brought up
from
Sheila. Who she's kind of an important character in the film because I think that she
I'm just watching her bound across that fucking driveway.
I think that she's an important character in the film
90s.
because I think that she is a representation of Renee and Alice in a very strange, different, in a mirror darkly. Like, I think that this is in Fred's interpretation, in Fred's Pete mind space, like this is like the Renee to the Alice that he's dreaming about. Like this is him being able to kind of control, or like him wanting, oh God, where am I going with this? Him wanting Renee to have wanted him as badly as he wanted her, while he's fucking around on her instead of the opposite going on.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
so
I think
there's like
Sheila
a bit of
power struggle,
like a revenge almost going on.
Exactly.
Yeah. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think that Sheila, I mean, first off, I think we all kind of agree that everything that goes on after the first third of the film is fictitious. Like these are not real people.
Yeah.
It's some kind of it's something. It's not it's something in a mind. It's an interpretation of the characters themselves.
Right.
It's whatever.
So I think that Sheila is an aspect of the interesting thing is that I think that if you boil this film down, there's really very few actual people. There's lots of characters, but they're all interpretations of different people.
They're all over the top too.
Well, yeah, for sure, depending on who you're talking about. But yes, but I think that Sheila is kind of the part of Renee that Fred wants to get revenge on, being this kind of like this dumb love-struck girl that just wants him, unequivocally wants him, and can't have him, and he gets to get one over on her in
That's
his
interesting.
mind. She does play a relatively, from a screen time point of view, small part in the movie, but you know, she's Pete's girlfriend who he's cheating on with Alice.
Yeah, and doesn't really seem to care
Not yet,
about
but he
that
starts
much.
to.
Yeah. Once he starts fucking around with Alice, and there's that one point
I
where
really want to talk about that one point. if you're going to talk about what I think you're talking about.
Where he goes to basically revenge fuck Sheila instead.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what I want to talk about.
Yeah,
Because there's that moment where Alice is like, I have to go somewhere with Mr. Eddie. And in his mind, Mr. Eddie's going to be fucking her tonight.
Yeah, so this is Fred's illusion starting to collapse on himself. Like the doubts that have plagued him in real life are starting to seep into his fantasy. And suddenly Alice isn't as perfect as he tried to make her be. Like she starts to have a will of her own and has problems and isn't as perfect and she's got complications and something going on. So then Pete/Fred is like, well, I'm going to go and fuck Sheila instead. And it's so shitty.
And it's super shitty too, because you can see it all over his face when he is in fact with her.
Yeah.
That it's completely, he's not.
It's revenge.
Even in the car, he's not, it's not a face of enjoyment. That's not a face of enjoyment. It's a face of desperation. I think he's desperate looking, sad even.
He might, I'm sorry,
Sheila.
you just freeze framed it. He might even have a fucking tear on his face. He's
Yeah.
clearly
Yeah, and
not
that's
happy.
what
He does.
Yeah, and I think it's because of this deep insecurity he has when he realizes that Alice is going to be with this other guy tonight. And that's what's interesting about this entire thing. I'm thinking about the Matrix real quick, because you're like, his illusion's collapsing in on itself. Do you remember in the beginning of Matrix where Neo's like, I can't do this shit, and Morpheus just beating him around because he's like, you control this shit.
Right.
But he's like, I can't, because my whole life I've believed that up is up and down is down and gravity works this way and this is how, and you have to breathe air. And he's like, is that air you're breathing now? That wake-up call in the Matrix, I'm going to apply to this in a little bit, because if we're believing his life's flashing in front of his eyes, we're believing he's memorizing this, or we're believing this is his weird death fantasy, then we can even see the insecurities at play. In other words, he's not the Morpheus of his own brain yet. He's not the Neo of his own brain yet. It still has these insecurities, like you're saying.
Yeah, of
Maaja.
course.
it's
No
flaws.
matter, like, you're still you, even if
still
you
you.
build a mind palace where you want to just control everything.
Because at the end of the day, it's still your mind.
Dude, if he
Your
was the Neo,
shitty, busted mind.
if he was the Neo of his own brain, then there would be no Mystery Man. There would be
Exactly.
no videotape. Like there would be no
Exactly.
creeping doubt, so to speak.
Nothing. Yep.
And I like the way the moments of his little bit of a crumbling are portrayed. Like there's that 2000s music video moment
Yeah.
where the light is flashing. I love Lynch's use of the sound of electricity, the buzzing, and like
Awesome.
and the moths are and the Black Widow crawling on the wall. Like all these little things that are starting to get into his head, and then he decides that I'm gonna go and bang Sheila now.
How much is this movie a protogenitor to fucking Mulholland Drive?
Oh,
When I-
yeah.
Oh
Big
yeah,
time.
for sure.
When I look at some of those, like the blurry shots with the electric noises, like that shit happens in Mulholland Drive multiple times.
Yeah.
And just like the general tenor of the film is this, and spoilers for Mulholland Drive, we're not discussing that movie and I won't go deep into it, obviously, but it's like, we're
That's
talking
only a
about
3-hour one. Do you want to dive into that one too?
Let's jump into that. Let's do an 8-hour podcast. No
that
problem.
simple film.
I saw it as a kid and it freaked me out so bad.
It's so good.
But the main point is like you've got a main character who has their life kind of going not the way that they want it to go, and so they end up creating a fantasy, and it's not overtly explained to the audience, so you're left open to interpret what's fantasy and what's not. So there's a lot of film techniques that I feel like Lost Highway in a lot of ways was like him honing his craft to get around to a Mulholland Drive. And I'm not saying one is better than the other, but I think that
Sounds
he
like
learned.
that's exactly what you just said.
No, I'm just saying that I think that he learned a lot from Lost Highway. I've stated I actually prefer Lost Highway to Mulholland Drive.
Yeah. I think
But,
I do too, actually.
But I think that he was vetting a lot of techniques in this movie that went into Mulholland Drive. And when Maaja was just mentioning that kind of like blurring effect with the electricity, that's something that happens multiple times in Mulholland Drive. So it's kind of cool and unique to Lynch.
And then, of course, as we get into like the kind of like the final third of this movie, you're getting into, oh, here it comes. The dumb boy's going to get manipulated into killing somebody. The dumb fucking pussy drunk guy is going to get tricked.
Interesting how he twists the narrative into putting the blame on Alice
Right.
when he himself is a killer.
Yep.
So he's trying to put the blame basically on I feel like
Renee,
he's
right?
saying that Renee, it's your own fault that I killed you because you went and did the bad thing and I had to get rid of you.
Right. And Alice, do we think Alice is a representation of what his worst fears are that maybe Renee did? Or do we think maybe there's some truth in maybe Renee's past attached to this?
That I think is one of the biggest glaring questions of the movie is that Lynch paints this narrative of like the worst possible. Like if you think your wife is cheating on you, but no, it turns out that she's like in crazy porno parties, like really fucking cheating on you. Not like just boning some guy in a motel, but like crazy fucking porno parties.
Like she's
where,
got to take breaks.
Like
there's
after she's taken it in the ass, she then goes into the theater and makes out with the dude she just took it in the ass from while watching herself getting taken in the ass. Like that shit gets real dark real quick. And I think that's where it becomes like, no, I think that
boner?
this is
just throwing it out there.
I think that this is probably Fred's worst nightmare as opposed to reality, right?
Yeah.
But then the
Definitely
only
not my
thing that
worst
throws it
nightmare.
into question.
I mean, if it was my wife, but I'm just saying, watching this scene is not my worst nightmare.
Oh, you mean the
this
one where
scene
also
is like
I'm
the
pretty
hottest
sure-
scene I've ever.
You like
100%.
porno? You like porno? It gives you a boner.
The hottest thing in the world. The reason the scene is so hot, outside of how she looks, is when the beast arrives on her face.
Oh yeah.
Right, the
Beast arrives on her face, and I'm like, yes,
Yeah.
because as Pete says later in this scene, you liked
it,
right?
And he says it in such an accusing way of like such a despise in his voice of like, you liked it. And this I feel like is his worst fears about
Is that
Renee
she does
manifested
like it.
into like the fear of what his wife could actually be like and what is her past, what did she do, what is she into? What is she into? Clearly she's not into me, so she must be into all this fucking crazy shit.
Mm-hmm. The crazy thing that's just occurring to me now is actually the idea that Fred's jealousy is based on not even infidelity, stuff that happened before they were even married. Like that,
and we don't know if anything even happened.
And we don't, like Brian just said,
Yeah.
Right. Like
she's a little friendly to Andy, but that's it.
Right. No, and you know what? Before we even had this discussion tonight, I always just kind of took it for granted that, she was fucking Andy and that Dick Laurent was a fictitious element. But like, Maaja mentioned it, I think, in the first 5 minutes. Like, we don't know that she did anything.
We don't know anything.
There's no actual evidence.
That's why fear is so powerful.
I think Dick Laurent is a real person because he gets mentioned in the party and Renee comes over like, oh, how do you know? Like she also recognizes the name. But this is also, again, Fred's perspective to where he's reading into every little detail of like, oh, so my wife knows this Dick Laurent guy and she's being a little like suspicious and worried about hearing his name. What does this mean? They must be in on it all together. And also he's in the photograph. There is the photograph that the cops look at.
Yes.
And there's Renee and Andy and Dick Laurent. So they do have a history together, but we never know what that history is. We don't know if there's crazy sex parties and porn and filming
Maaja,
whatever.
that's
and
where I feel like David Lynch is fucking with me, right? Because he shows me the photograph, right?
Yeah.
That first off, you see the photograph that's got Mr. Eddie / Dick Laurent, and it's got Andy, and it's got both of them, right? And then you see the cops look at it later, and there's only one girl, and you're like, oh, that's the reveal. Like, I get it now that there's only one of them, but the other two are real. And then I'm like, But it's a
And it's a
David
man-
Lynch movie, so I don't fucking know if any of the photos are real. It does. None of it fucking matters.
The photograph made me imagine that this is like Alice is an aspect of Renee. I'm sorry, like Pete is an aspect of Fred. I think Alice is an aspect of Renee.
I think
Whether it's a past possible and it's basically just a phantom, a fear.
Yeah,
Right?
I think initially Fred created Alice as this idealized version of Renee, who is in a bad situation. He gets to be the hero and rescue her from out of it, and she's so in love with him and wants to be with him. And this is the ideal version. But then the reality and all those gnawing fears that in the real world got to the point where he killed his wife. Those start seeping into the fantasy, and all of them start to manifest into this crazy shit that Alice is involved in. But that's what he feared that Renee was up to.
Wait a minute. Now you just made my mind unlock to something different.
Oh,
Which is, what if one of the big, you're saying Alice is an idealized version of Renee in Fred's head in the Pete stuff, right?
Yeah.
So what that says, if that's true, then what that says to me is that maybe the fear is that Renee has done stuff in the past that Fred is trying to cope with, and that Pete is rescuing Alice from doing it in the future, type of thing, right?
Oh, I love
yes.
that. I love
Right,
that.
That's
because
kind of a
he's
cool
trying to
turn.
stop it. Like, I can stop the bad stuff that's happening, and the reason this scene is so powerful is because we're trying to imagine, like, he's like, oh, I'm going to rescue her from this stuff.
Right.
I'm going to
So
get her out of this, as opposed to him being like, well, maybe Fred's problem is Renee did this in the past, and maybe she's still moonlighting at weird parties that I don't know about. Maybe that's why she's staying home to resist the lure of going to whatever fucking party she's supposed to go to. I'm just going to read books.
yeah. So I think it's possible that Renee does really have something of a similar past to what Alice is doing.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't know if she does.
Correct.
It's a possibility. And I feel like if that is the case, then yeah, it's highly likely that Renee married Fred to get out of this life.
Yep.
But maybe it still has a bit of a hold on her.
Yeah,
Maybe
and a
there's
hold
still
on
something.
him.
Clearly
he
it has
definitely can't
more
get
of a
over it.
hold on him.
The reality is when you're with somebody, with your partner, or permanent partner, you don't want to be the fifth person in line as to how awesome your sex is. Like, you want to be able to communicate and talk and know what people like and their desires. And I'm coming back to something Brian said, but I think it's important if we want to be really honest. You were saying he's not even mad about stuff she's doing while they're together. He was concerned about stuff that happened in the past, and I think that's a real fear for some people. I'll speak openly about it. I've had insecurities about that kind of shit in the past, because because you want to be able to communicate with your partner. You want your partner to be able to communicate with you. You want to be able to fulfill each other's desires and fantasies. You want to be able to do weird and fucked up shit with each other. You want that openness, right? And I think Fred's just incapable of that. He's incapable of those difficult, vulnerable conversations. He doesn't know how to, so he just lays on his wife and he humps her and she pats him on the back and she imagines getting railed from behind at a party and how much better that was. And that's his major fucking fear, right? And I think that's a real insecurity sometimes. And it is
For
an
a lot of
insecurity.
people.
It's not based in reality usually, although sometimes it is. The last thing you want is for your wife to be thinking, God, I wish I was fucking, Joey again, because this is running its fucking course.
Or in a weird sex party with Marilyn Manson.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, no shit,
So,
dude.
It does play on a lot of sort of male insecurities specifically. I think females have them too.
Yeah, of course.
To be honest with you,
course.
Dean, and I don't want to necessarily boil the whole film down to like a very simple point, but it really is all about insecurity.
It is a lot of it. Yeah,
It's
for sure.
like Fred has so much insecurity about his relationship with Renee, which you can see just based on watching them interact. We talked about how the very beginning of the film is so quiet. Like, he doesn't even talk to her. Like
the silence between them is deafening.
Right. And I'm kind of coming around to the idea that I think that based on Renee's behavior at the beginning of this film, that she is kind of trying to get away from a certain kind of lifestyle. And Fred is just unable to accept it. It's like she picked the wrong guy to move on with. It seems.
Because in now to Fred's point, and I have very little sympathy for him, but to Fred's point, if your wife was involved in this kind of lifestyle, there's probably a part of Fred going, how am I ever going to please the lady who was at porn sex parties with Marilyn Manson? How am I ever going to be just regular fucking her? And she's not like, oh, it was much cooler when, the dude had a fucking electrical cord around my neck and Marilyn Manson videos were on in the background. So that's something we all have to contend with sometimes on some level. And then, buy fucking electrical cords, or kill your wife. I don't know what you're going to do. But you got to figure out.
Hold a gun to her head and make her strip.
Yeah. Let's get crazy. It's all fun. We saw it, right? Doesn't go back to Sopranos. Doesn't Richie Aprile hold a gun to Janice's head?
Oh yeah.
It wasn't loaded, Tony.
Ralphie's literally taking it up the ass from Janice.
That's right. Yes.
Oh my God. I hate that scene. I don't know why it makes me so uncomfortable.
That should surprise nobody, by the way.
No. Richie's the one who holds the gun to Janice's head.
Yes.
Janice is the one who fucks Ralphie in the ass.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Quick aside. Yeah, just quick aside. Sorry, I just needed to set everybody straight.
So when Janice ends up with Bobby Bacalari, he has to understand that unless you want to go to weird places, you might never satisfy her the way Richie did.
Yeah.
Let's be honest,
okay with that.
he was all about food stuff. All right,
Bobby. He's like, Janice, I'm going to dribble the fucking manigot on your tits.
Wait, you don't like a nice demi-glaze?
Get off my sister, you calzone with legs. Tony. I'm going to put the marinara on your butt cheeks. All right, whatever you say, Bobby. Is this like what Richie did? No, this is kind of messy. Just stick a 45 to the back of my head, you pussy.
A little mozzarella on the nipples.
Put a little mozzarella on your bush. I can't get it out, Bobby. It's a terrible fucking scene.
Oh, man.
Sorry. Mozzarella, Janice? What the fuck, Tony, when he's talking to her later? The same mozzarella that your grandmother shredded? Anyway. What's happening? I put a spell on you. Come on, we're bringing it back.
Oh, shit.
Okay.
So, yeah, but it's funny that after that crazy scene, God, Jesus.
I like the scene that you just pulled up right here is her
hypnotizing him?
Yes, dude. Yeah, her eyes might as well be spirals, just like fucking spinning, telling him exactly what he's gonna do when he goes to Andy's house. I also like that Andy's house is the same house as the party. It's just that there's nobody there and it's dark.
Same Andy.
Right. Same Andy. Same character.
He's the same because he has that disdain for Andy. I think that he put him in there in his, in this kind of representation of whatever's going on while he's dying. He puts Andy's the same in the real life and in his mind because he thinks she's cheating on him with Andy.
Yeah, it's the same backstory of like she met Andy at Moke's and became friends and heard about a job.
Yep.
And it's so interesting because that is what Fred gets from Renee in the car when they're driving home after the party. That's
but she
everything
says she
that
doesn't
Renee
remember,
says.
Right?
Yeah, but that's everything. And here in the fantasy world, he fills in what the job is and what their relationship actually is in his mind.
Yes.
Which really just makes me doubt if there was anything of the sort happening with Renee in real world.
I like it.
Yeah.
This particular analysis and viewing, or last couple of viewings, I should say, has made me come around a lot more kindly to Renee specifically. In terms of
for sure.
that, like, I just like Maaja mentioned it right at the top. There's kind of literally no evidence that she did anything against Fred.
Correct.
Yep.
And while I do believe that there's a reason for there to be the thing in his mind that's bothering him. I think that it's her past. I don't think that it's her present.
Yes.
And
maybe, yeah.
And speaking to what Dean, you were saying, it's that great insecurity of like letting go of the past, of like, I don't need to measure up to anybody. Like this person is with me now and they had a previous life before that.
Correct.
And that's I'll speak candidly. I'm divorced.
Everybody.
That's a difficult thing.
It's very much a man thing.
It is. I've seen that it impacts men harder than women, as I've observed in terms.
But you've
of
been there too, Maaja.
Oh yeah,
said,
of
previous
course.
partners.
Yeah. I mean, it's always the whole like, who have you been like? It really just, but that's early day stuff. Like you have to get over that.
It is early day stuff.
Yeah,
right?
it's early days. Early days in a relationship, you go over the whole like
you're
who have
insecure
you
still.
Yeah, because you haven't built that deep trust that you possibly cannot have built at that stage. So yeah, of course that comes nagging, and like even still sometimes I like something that Dean told me about whatever ex, it like comes up in my head. I'm like a little bit insecure. I'm like, that's fucking stupid. We're married and I'm gonna spend the rest of my life with him. What the fuck am I thinking about? Like something like that. Yeah, but it's still like stuff like that just comes up. It's a human. It's instinct. It's just natural. As long as you don't let it consume you, obviously.
Yeah, for sure.
And you don't murder your wife over it and then have a whole schism of a psychotic episode that we're watching a movie about.
With this movie, one of the things we see an utter failure at is that we don't really know. We can only go off of what we see, right? I think we always have to remember that with movies, our job is not to fill in the blanks outside of our own interpretation of stuff, and we have to. A lot of times, maybe Lynch is an exception to the rule. We have to just go, what's the movie showing us? Because that's what the movie wants to tell us, right? And I think going on the same line of conversation, thinking about the insecurity, the past being what it is, quote, measuring up, as Brian said, figuratively or literally, as it were. And just this idea of what that means, because yes, in the early days, you haven't built that connection, and we're not seeing it with Fred can't write a character. Fred can't even write an idealized version of a character without it collapsing in on itself, right? Because he doesn't have that skill set. He doesn't have whatever it is.
He doesn't have the confidence.
He doesn't have the confidence. And there's no trust between him and Renee. We don't see it at all. We just see space between them, as we've said 100 times. And one thing that Fred hasn't done with Renee is he hasn't said, even if it was true, let's say it is true, let's talk about the parties. Let's talk about those moments. Awesome. That was hot for you. Cool. Tell me what was hot about it. Is that something we can achieve in this relationship? Is that something that you're going to resent in that you can't be taken to those heights again? Is that going to be a problem? So it worry you? All that stuff has to be discussed, and you have to be open and vulnerable.
Dean, that is way too constructive language for Fred.
That's my point. Fred doesn't have any of that.
Any of that.
Exactly. He's a fucking ghost, right? He's just a walking insecurity whose only job is to wail into his sax badly and then wail on his wife badly. He's not doing anything well, which is really unfortunate. And because he can't go into that spot, and maybe some of this lies, maybe their lack of communication, and maybe some of it lies on Renee too. But what certainly doesn't lay on Renee is her own death. That's purely him and his fault. And what is a little indiscretion or insecurity, as it were, grows into mutilation, rage. And
dude, have you? And this is like a quick frame, but have you paused it?
Yeah.
Oh God,
it's fucking nuts.
It's fucking crazy. I mean, so I looked at it just today. First off, the detail that she's got Bush is. Cool, Lynch.
Yeah,
cool.
She's a woman. Thank God.
But so there's a hand. There's like a puddle on the bed. There's like a pool where there's like a clear pooling point. There's a hand on the bed. There's set of legs below the pelvis on the floor,
Set of legs.
missing 1 foot, and then there's also a torso that is detached from.
You're, what are you, what are you in the courtroom?
I'm trying.
Judge, I did.
This is your opening statement. And you're like, and here's what he did to her.
And by the way, you're trying to fucking hone in on it. Here it is right here. Okay. So there's the leg on the bed that's in the like nuclear impact of the blood pool, right?
Yep.
There's the 2 legs.
Jesus.
There's the hand with the wedding ring on it on the bed, which I think is a cool detail.
I just want to put a comic strip, like comic bubble, on this freeze frame that just says "Oops."
The look, and
sorry.
by the way, I give Pullman credit on his acting in this particular scene, which is just looking really fucking unhinged.
Yeah. It helps when there's guts laying around you, but
There's the body parts.
It does help when you're on that set with those people. But yeah, like what he did to Renee was not pretty.
No. That's a lot of rage.
It's horrifying. And can I point out one little detail about the whole murder, like the moments before that and the eerie going into the hallway and everything? There is a moment where we see 2 shadows walk across the living room.
Yeah, I mentioned that earlier.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Sorry, I missed
That's
it.
okay.
Okay, yeah, but because did you think that that's Fred and the mystery man?
I wasn't sure. I just noted them. So I'm glad you're bringing them back up to give them proper analysis. I just noted that they played across the wall.
Yeah.
I like that interpretation a lot.
I really thought
Fred and his shadow.
Well, that's the mystery man there to document. He's got the camera. He's going to film the whole horrible thing.
Yeah.
To show
by
it
the
to
way,
Fred.
Which makes him part of his conscience. It's his conscience.
Yeah, right. It doesn't even fly in the face of the idea that like the mystery man isn't like a real person, so to speak. But in the interpretive manner of the film, like showing the shadow following him, like that follows the theme of what we're talking about.
It does.
Yeah.
Yep. A conscious an other self.
Especially if you know, I said at the very top, like that I very much feel that this entire film is completely unreliable and is from Fred's perspective. That doesn't mean that nothing in it is true. It just means that there are a lot of parts of it that are skewed. So like when you see something like a second shadow on a wall that is, you know, a cameraman, so to speak.
Right.
That doesn't mean that there was an actual shadow on the wall if we were to take this film as like an actual thing that happened, that there probably wouldn't have been a shadow on the wall. It's just to say that like in this interpretation, yeah, of course there was, because there was someone watching. So
I like it a lot, by the way, Brian. That's good shit. The getting back to Fred the incel who's autistic. So a couple of things. When Fun Boy comes down green stairs wearing red Speedos, he was fucking that girl. Number one.
Oh yeah. And
number two, here's the most incel autistic thing that happens. The whole time, the video just keeps playing.
Yep.
Like, you would hope if you were a normal person, you shut that off. You shut the video off. If you're a normal person and you don't shut it off, the girl of your dreams shuts it off. No, nobody shuts it off.
In this entire sequence, exactly 100% what I'm thinking is like, the first thing I would have done when I went in is try to find a remote to shut it off. And if I couldn't, then I would really hope that the girl who is getting fucked in the ass on the screen right in front of me.
That's your contention.
My
we have
girl.
no proof.
We have no proof that it's in the ass.
It could just be
from behind.
Could just be doggy. Based on the way this girl parties,
in my mind palace, just like Fred's, it's the worst possible. It's the worst possible permutation. All right.
And by worst, you mean best. Sorry. No, but Here's what I think.
Damn.
What I like about this scene, too, is that it's such a sad incel scene because he's like, you don't really like that, do you? Is that what you're into? All judgy, right? Those guys. Is that what you're into? Instead of like, cool, I guess we're taking this shit to the next level, huh? High five. I've seen the tapes. I know what you're into. Instead, he's really like special boy, cutesy boy hurt. He's like, you really like that? She's like, yeah. That's what I fucking like.
That's what I'm into. Oh, okay. I guess I can never do that to you. Oh.
The funniest part about this movie, and you mentioned it real early on. I think it was you, Dean, that like why is she into this dude at all? Yeah. Of course, because it's Bill Pullman's fantasy and like it makes sense. But it's like this Balthazar Getty character could not possibly be attractive to this Alice character. There's no way.
Outside of using him to kill her oppressive parents.
Exactly. And that's what he then turns it into. Yeah. He's like, oh, you were just using me all along. So it's almost like he trapped himself into this story of like, I was never good enough, actually. I was never...
No, it's a good point. It's a good point, Maaja, is that, and I think it's almost overlooked when you look at the movie on a surface level, because you're not thinking about necessarily the idea that he's already excuse making for himself. Mm-hmm. Like, the reason why you fucked me over is because you're such a whore that you were using me just for some other purpose. Like, Renee is not using Fred for anything.
No.
Like, it's not.
She wants to stay home and read.
Right. It seems like you said, Dean, like an hour ago, like it seems like she's trying to get towards like a normal life with Fred. And
maybe.
And he can't get over it.
And he can't get over her past. And that's the real problem. But
to the point where even in this flash of consciousness, by the time the guy throws the switch and by the time you die in the chair, if this whole thing happens in that instance, right? Life flashes before your eyes, right? Going back to that story, the incident at Owl Creek or whatever the fuck it's called, is that it's doubly kind of pathetic and sad that he still can't see Alice more than this, right? At the end, he's really enamored with her, and then it's almost like, they're all fucking lie, manipulative fucking whores in the end.
It is incel shit. It really is.
That guy
it really
shit.
Is.
It really is.
It really
that
is.
Shit.
I'm not even saying that I'm playing devil's advocate when I say I will give the credit that this is probably occurring over the course of 5 seconds. So it's like,
I think so.
How much introspection are you really going through while you're being electrocuted? Like, he has a very specific image in his head, and that's what David Lynch is giving us the peek into. I don't think that he's like changing as a person.
It's funny because I'm like, all these moments are like where the viper comes out in her, right? The first thing that happens is when she comes down the stairs. I was making jokes earlier, but the reality is the first thing when she comes down the stairs, if the reality was she doesn't immediately turn that projector off, then Fred has a fucking point.
Yeah. He's kind of justified in his worries.
Maybe not in killing her, but he should be like, okay, I'm out. See ya. Right?
But now he gets to play the victim, which is the next
You
step
stole my
for
thunder,
people.
but good. No, keep going.
No, but that is the next step for people like this.
That's
like,
right.
If I can't be the hero, then I'm going to be the victim.
Yep.
Yeah.
For sure. Which is crazy because when she has the gun on him, I'm like, here we fucking go.
But no, she was just playing.
Right. But she's not done yet because they go to the cabin. And then
she was just playing in the fantasy, though. That's why, like, all of it becomes very difficult. It becomes so difficult to interpret because it's all like the beginning of the movie. I think that we can split hairs about the accuracy of it.
Sure.
The latter 2/3 of the movie, I think we can all agree that it's not real. These aren't real people. So this is
Correct.
Fred's interpretation. So at that point, it's like when she's pointing the gun at him, like, is she fucking with him? Is she not fucking with him? I don't fucking know. I really don't.
Right. They're not real people insofar as they could be real as in they were people experienced. And this is you know what I mean? Like, well, obviously, for Andy, for example, Fun Boy. We see Fun Boy in the beginning. We see Fun Boy in this quote unquote world. So he's somebody that transferred into that, right? That's why. But the greatest mindfuck of it all is the movie opens with Dick Laurent is dead. That kind of might mean the whole movie's fucking where that the whole movie could be throwing the fucking switch. The whole movie could be Jacob Slatter. He's laying in the jungle. The whole movie is that time he takes to lay in the jungle and die. The 2 minutes it takes him to bleed to death is the whole fucking movie.
I see what you're
That
saying.
could be
You could be talking about like 1 second into the movie or 2 hours and 31 minutes and 59 seconds into the movie.
Because you can't physically explain Dick Laurent is dead in the fucking intercom in the first movie.
Yeah, because
it doesn't make any sense.
It opens and ends in the same way.
Correct.
With that information being given to him by himself.
That's
so it
right.
forms a loop.
Correct. It's a predestination paradox, but not really because it's not time travel.
Right.
Maaja, I challenge you with Lynch knowledge. You know that's the reason. You know that's the reason this movie was written, right? Because
it actually happened.
It actually happened to him that
Someone
someone
went to his door. Yes,
showed up at his
Somebody went to his
apartment
door.
and went to his intercom and just said Dick Laurent is dead. And when he went down to check who it was, there was no one there.
so
And
awesome.
It's like always stuck in his head. Yeah,
And
it's fucking fucked
also
up.
because the way his house was, he wasn't able to see outside from
Right.
the intercom. So he wanted to replicate that in the movie, to where they bought a house and changed it
Awesome.
and built like changed the configurations to where Fred has to walk to the weird window to look outside and doesn't see anybody there. But yeah,
And why?
all of this
Because he's David Lynch.
yeah, exactly. Because he had a weird moment. Somebody just happened to come to the wrong door. I think it was because his next door neighbor was also named David. And the person on the intercom was like, David. And he goes, yes, Dick Laurent is dead.
Awesome.
So somebody just went to deliver a message and got the wrong door, and Lost Highway is the fucking result.
Also, that movie's probably more creepy than that movie that wasn't told is more creepy than this one.
I know, what happened?
Holy
Who's Dick
shit.
Laurent? What the fuck?
That is super, super creepy. I want to talk about. I think we're kind of reaching the end of our interpretive podcast here, but the end where she's fucking him in the dirt. By the way, and it's the exposure's really high and hair's being flipped, and he's desperate to hold on to her in that moment. Right? He's like, I want you. First of all, you have her. Live in the fucking moment.
Well,
You're having
start
her
at
in
the
that
beginning.
moment.
She starts off by saying, "You still want me, don't you, Pete?"
Right.
And I think that's a great. I think that's an important piece to mention before the beginning of the scene is from Fred's perspective. That like I don't want to use the word. It's almost like she's like a tease to him. Like
Yeah, it doesn't seem like a sufficient word, but
right. I'm struggling to come up with the terminology. Yeah, temptation. Like it's like from his perspective, she's manipulative. Like, you still want me, you still want me. And when he finally admits, yes, I do, she says, you can never have me.
and she walks off.
And she walks away. Dude, it might be the best line of the movie.
And that breaks his this whole thing. That breaks him. It breaks Pete.
Mm-hmm.
And what you see, Fred Wait is kind of a guy in the dirt now.
Yeah, it's
And
the
it's Fred
last you
again.
see of Pete, right?
Yeah,
Yep.
that makes sense, right?
Yeah,
Because it shattered his illusion.
Yeah.
Was that she was like, even in his own insecurities have been bleeding through slowly, even though it's his story.
Yeah.
It's been slowly trickling in. And at the end, it comes to this crescendo of that, I'm insecure even in my own little fantasy. Before I shuffle off my mortal coils, I still have these insecurities.
Or I have to face the reality.
Yes.
He'll never have her because she's dead, because he killed her.
Yes.
So yeah. No wonder that his little world comes crumbling down.
I just, the moment when she just says it, and I remember the first time that I watched the movie and I saw it and it was just like, fuck, dude.
Yeah.
When she's just like, and a lot of movies would do it a little bit differently, where there would be other sound, there would be music, there would be something else going on that would obfuscate, like make it a little bit softer. That like, you'll never have me. But it is just like fucking crystal clear. And and like, if you could be a lip reader, you know, it's crystal clear as well. Just, you'll never have
it's
me.
really hammered.
Like, it is fucking brutal. Yeah. But then we go to the mystery man with the camera immediately. And it goes to that creepy theme of like reality just cropping up. And the camera is that. In this movie.
What does he say? His dialogue's very important here. And her name's Renee.
Yeah, and I
in other words, face the fucking reality, bitch. I'm in your head.
I love that Renee gets the final word.
Yeah,
like, she
me too.
gets to be like, fuck you, you'll never have me.
Yeah.
You killed me.
Yep, it's awesome. And then we have the Lost Highway come up, and then we have a denouement. Like then we have him dealing with Laurent. What do we? I feel like it could have ended here, but no, and it's okay that it didn't. Let's talk about kind of like the end though, the titular Lost Highway and him dealing with Laurent and us seeing Renee's hair, Renee's exact outfit from the party.
It is.
Exact outfit from the party.
Yeah.
And then him ambushing this guy.
Yeah, while Renee is sleeping with Dick Laurent. Of course, it all comes back together. Like he brings back Renee now that Alice, the perfect virgin, has rejected him.
Yeah.
But by the way, the mystery man, he has a lodge. He has a black lodge.
yeah, the cabin.
Yeah. He's one of them. He's a friend of Bob's.
I like the idea of it being a representation of something recessed deep in your brain.
Yeah, and the way those images of it
brain.
like on fire and coming back together, I love that. It feels like, it really feels like a visual representation of a something powerful, subconscious that I just can't put into words, and I don't need to, because it's something real, but I don't need to know what it is.
Yeah. I like it visually as... Is Brian dying? I just want to make sure he isn't.
I am
You all
dying.
right there, buddy?
No, I'm doing okay. I'm back.
As the cabin being like representative, like the deep recess of your brain, and her walking into it naked and then being gone.
Yeah.
It's just great. And then this dude there, like, hey, reality time.
I like the point also earlier on. He gets a call. He goes back home and Sheila dumps him and all that. And he gets a call from Dick Laurent, who is like, or Mr. Eddie in this iteration. It's Mr. Eddie. And he's like, oh, are you doing good, Pete? I'm so happy you're doing well. And like, I know you're fucking my girl.
Yeah, that's
I'm
what
gonna
he's
get you.
Yep.
But cue the mystery man. He's there and he delivers some very creepy lines about like in the Far East when they sentence a man to death, they send him to a
Masha,
place and like,
I love
I'm
that
coming
line.
after you. Yeah,
I love
it's
that line
so
because
good.
when they sentence a man to death and they say something to the effect of, and it actually is pretty prescient to what's going on in the movie.
He says when a person is sentenced to death, they're sent to a place where they can't escape, never knowing when an executioner might step up behind them and fire a bullet into the back of their head.
Mm-hmm. It actually, I'm going to invoke another brilliant, a bard of our time, I guess you could say. In Steven Seagal, who said,
"That's not the name I expected to hear."
A bard of our time, who says in the film Hard to Kill, where he comes back as Karate Jesus, and he says,
What the fuck?
when he comes back and he says something along the lines of. Anticipation of death is worse than death itself. That's kind of what that guy is saying. He's like, you never know.
Yeah.
You can't escape it. It's inevitable, and it will come. And yes, I think it's poignant in this film specifically because we know that if we go with I like to remember things how I want to remember them, if we go with you don't know when death is going to come, and you tie all that back together, the instant of his death, arguably when the electricity kills him, we're going to keep on that route. We don't quite know when that's going to happen. We don't quite know when the movie's going to end, right? By the way, that look she gives that guy's giant cock, she goes, wow.
I think that's Manson.
It is.
I assume
it
it's
is.
Manson in front. She
And
goes
Twiggy
like,
Ramirez,
"Whoa."
Yes.
dude, your lady's getting dug out by half of the band. All right,
Yeah.
I can see why you're upset.
And also it's being shown through this weird little, like, what do you even call that? The screen on the little thing that he
Oh, the
hands
projection,
Laurent.
a film projector, little one at the home.
Oh, no. Like when they have Dick Laurent in the ground and he's handed, the mystery man hands him
it's
the
like a
little
portable TV.
receiver. Yeah, like a portable TV that he watches these things from. And then it swaps into his own viewpoint. And I
So
love
awesome.
that.
With Rammstein playing.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Yeah, hell yeah! I know you'd like this. The soundtrack's phenomenal.
It's amazing.
It's so good.
What somebody explain the end to me. This part, I mean. I want to hear interpretations and then we'll wrap this up. I want to hear interpretations of right here. So whether he's a Jungian shadow, whether he's a part of our consciousness, whether he represents an aspect of our personality or all of it or none of it. He is the one saying, look, almost like, look at the sins that you have. Look at what you deserve what you're about to get. I'm showing you what you've done. Because that's why I like the fact that the mystery man is really a part of, everything's a part of Fred because this is in his brain, presumably. So what do we think of the end of this? Is this just our revenge porn for him before he goes? Like he couldn't fulfill the fantasy of the fantasy of Alice because she walked away, said, "You'll never have me." So now we're left with this.
The interesting question that you pose is about Mr. Eddie / Dick Laurent, right?
Yeah.
Because part of me wants to make Dick Laurent a bigger character because of Lynch's experience, and he put him into the film. So I started.
Mr. Eddie is Dick Laurent. I think we can agree.
Yes. So I started to think of it from a more meta standpoint, which is like David Lynch put him into this movie because he had that personal experience, right? But then how important is Dick Laurent / Mr. Eddie to the story? Like, do we believe that Renee
I didn't think he was very important.
/ Alice was involved in pornography? Do we
Maybe,
believe
yes.
that maybe, right?
I don't.
Because if we're to believe, maybe she wasn't, but maybe she just knows them. But I believe based on the crime scene alone, right? Whose interpretation is this? Where are we now? What's the crime scene? It's independent of Pete. It's independent of Fred. Is it real? Is it a look at, hey, look, there she is. She's standing between Eddie and Dick Laurent. Dick Laurent, you want a porno? Fucking porno. Andy's a fucking, look at the mustache. This guy is not Peninsulare who's sword fighting in fucking Mexico. He's a fucking, look at him. So what is it, right? She has a picture with them. That doesn't mean she's done pornographics with them, but we know they're sketchy fucking dudes. These are sketchy guys that they have a picture of her at their house. Is that just why?
Yeah, but this is also a part of Fred's fantasy. Even this investigation is just happening in Fred's head, and it just circles back to him being guilty and the police eventually being after him, even in his fantasy.
I mean, Maaja, you don't need to convince me because I've said from the jump that I believe that no image that you see in this movie can be completely trusted to be anything that's anything other than Fred's interpretation.
Right.
That's
and
not to say that none of it isn't, but
I pushed back on that in the beginning of the discussion by suggesting that if we aren't seeing a scene that Fred or Peter's directly involved in, then maybe Lynch is letting clues through. But that's not true either. That doesn't mean I'm right. It doesn't at all. But I always, whenever we go with narrator is whatever or POV of character we're following and we see shit going on from another character's perspective, I always go, is this additional information beyond what we're getting from the POV of Fred? Do you see what I'm saying?
agree with
He's
you
not in the
by and
shot.
large.
He's not here.
I just hate to be pedantic and say that when David Lynch is involved, there's a little bit of a different flavor to it. Where it's like, I can't necessarily trust any of it.
Right.
Yeah. And
I guess my point is to be equally pedantic, I guess you can't trust it one way or the other.
And you don't even need to know, like that's what he does. There is no correct answer. You're free you're free to make your own interpretation. And that's why I love his stuff.
Yep.
Which every time I talk about that reminds me of a time when I was in art school. I was 17 and there was a guy in my class who every time he made a piece, whatever art, whatever the fuck, he was like, this is kind of like a David Lynch movie. Everyone's free to make their own interpretation of it. And I eventually even got into a verbal argument with that guy.
Bullshit.
I actually yelled at that guy because he was so insufferable. And you know me, I don't talk to people. I don't argue with people.
Yep.
Anyway,
if I come home and I see a projection of you two on the wall, I'm going to be pretty pissed. I might even dismember you. Just kidding.
Nice.
Sexually dismember, you know, in a kinky way, not in a murder way.
Rammstein.
Not to put your body in a wood chipper way.
Rammstein. I felt bad listening to that on Hanukkah, but I still did.
Are you sad? Did you want to? Did you want to ask me something?
So he steams off and then shakes his head, and then we're on the Lost Highway, and then roll credits.
Yes, but I did want to talk about the final moments with the mystery man and what you thought about that.
Yeah, because what was our interpretation? Is this the good fun part where he gets to blow this guy's head away?
Yeah,
see,
because
that's what I was asking about, whether or not we believe. This is the biggest mystery, and I'm sorry to step. This is the biggest mystery about the end of the film to me, is that we finish on Dick Laurent / Mr. Eddie, when I feel like Andy was more like the push of who she was cheating on Fred with, right?
But I feel like Mr. Eddie is
the brainchild.
He's like the big bad. Andy is like the lower level.
Andy's a troll.
But I guess I'm asking, is Mr. Eddie the fictitious big bad, or is he the actual big bad where Andy is the real person? You know what I'm saying?
Well, why is Andy wait a minute.
We don't even know if Andy's the real.
I object.
How is
Andy a real person? How is Andy a real person, but Dick Laurent is not? Because the photo's bullshit.
They're both real people, but we have no proof whatsoever that Renee has ever actually done anything with either of them. We just know that she knows them.
Deep insecurity says otherwise.
We never saw Dick Laurent. We never saw Dick Laurent or Mr. Eddie before the fantasy started. We saw Andy in both.
Are you talking about the fantasy when he hears somebody say Dick Laurent's dead in the first 2 seconds of the movie?
Man, fuck you.
But he's in the photo. He's in the photo with Renee.
He's in the photo and he's at the party with Fred.
They're both in the photo.
He's not. I don't think he's in the party, but Renee reacts to hearing the name and is like, I know this person. What are you saying? Okay. Is he dead? So,
well, let's not get too lost in the weeds on this, guys.
But I wanted to talk about the mystery man and the final scene because I stand by my thought of him being like an entity that is kind of called to where when somebody is really going off the deep end and is like murderous and horrible. And I feel like
that seems so far-fetched. I'm kidding. The whole fucking movie's insane.
I feel like the mystery man, like, because he says, you invited me. And I think that not only did he invite him into his home, but he invited the mystery man into himself, like to be a part of him.
That's almost why I took the mystery man as a dark aspect of his personality that he let come out.
It could be, but I feel like maybe he's, if I my theory is that he's an entity, and that he then comes into the fantasy world as well, almost as a threat of like I'm still after you because I work for Mr. Eddie, but no, I don't. In the end, I actually help you. But in helping Fred, he's also providing the evidence of the porn party and like, this is how bad Mr. Eddie is. Like I'm fortifying all the most horrible things and even providing more than Fred is capable of coming up with, because clearly he's a shitty, he can't come up with a good story.
But wait a minute.
So the mystery man is providing even more of like, here's all the awful things, and I enjoy the awful. I feed off of it.
That would make okay. But you're kind of going Twin Peaks. You're going you're going Mystery Man is a malevolent entity who could be showing lies to Fred to push him over the edge. Where I'm saying, and based on the fact that it's Lynch, I don't think that's. I can't argue with you.
I'm not saying showing, but maybe just like fortifying his own doubts.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's why I
like
that's why
yeah.
I like
I see it in the middle.
Right.
I see it in the middle where I think that the Mystery Man is. I mean, I see it from a much more objective standpoint. That and I think I said it earlier.
Pardon me. We're over here in fucking hypothesis land. Lay the facts on us.
Well, I'm not saying objective in terms of my opinion. I'm saying objective in terms of for Fred. Like he's laying out facts. He's not landing an opinion to like good or evil. He's just saying like, this is what happened, Fred. Like I think.
No, you mean the Mystery Man? You're saying.
Yeah. And that's what I think that the video camera completely ties into that whole thing, and why Fred says I don't like that technology because I like to remember things however we've gone over it, but where his discomfort with the Mystery Man is that the Mystery Man is presenting to him the truth objectively
from a certain point of view,
unfettered. No, not even from a certain point of view. He's just saying like, this is what actually happened. He's showing.
Then why do you guys think Renee's innocent?
Well, I don't, because this is the fantasy world.
Why did you say you guys? What do you mean, you people?
You specifically. Why do you think Renee is innocent in the whole?
I didn't say Renee was innocent.
Okay, then how about you, Maaja? Didn't you say that?
Yes.
So wait, hold on. So Brian's contention is the Mystery Man showing us fact. Is that your?
I think so.
I think
that might undermine your last 2 hours of talking, but I like it.
What do you mean?
Go ahead, Maaja.
I think the Mystery Man has his own agenda because of what I believe him to be, which is he gets the most out of Fred when at first he's showing him the truth of here's what you did. I'm going to make you confront the horrible thing you did. But when we enter the fantasy world, he kind of sides with Fred to just get the last juices out of him before he's fried in the electric chair. Of like, here's all the horrible things, like, let me confirm all the worst things you always doubted and feared. Now that you've been driven to the point where you've actually committed the worst thing you could possibly do and you're going to die for it. So now let's just like fuel the nightmares even further. And then you're out.
Interesting. But he still gives him the pleasure of watching the object of all his terrible things die by pistol shot to the head.
Yeah.
You'd think a malevolent entity would deny him that feeling of justice to watch that guy's brains get splattered all over.
But if he is
desert.
malevolent, maybe he is a little bit like, hey, you did the thing that I get the enjoyment out of, which is the murder. Like, and now he's just kind of toying with him.
Possibly. Maybe that's why the Mystery Man is the trigger puller and not Fred himself. Maybe. Right. Yeah, I don't know. But I like the idea. That's why I like the idea of the video, going back to Brian's point about the video camera, the technology. The technology we haven't talked about, but it's an interesting injection into this movie. Why a video camera? Why that technology? Why are we showing it that way? I prefer to remember things the way I like to remember them. Yeah, until the dark recesses of your mind, a.k.a., in my opinion, the Mystery Man does not allow you to do that. He's keeping tabs. The real part of your brain that you're trying to deny is keeping tabs on you. See this video recorder? That's your evidence, although I think of that more as a metaphor for like memory you can't escape, right? I think the video is more of a like that. Like, see, and he uses it, maybe to your point, Maaja, to sort of bend this guy to do or to imagine unthinkable things, like with the party, right? He's like, look at this shit. That's in your head now, forever.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it could be true. That could be actually Renee's past. And if it is, then good for her. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, as long as you didn't cheat or do shit while being married and supposedly loyal to your husband. But otherwise, like, go ahead. Have fun, girl.
Yeah. Do you live your best life? Yeah. Anything else?
Anything else?
Silence.
I mean, hey, do you guys want to get into this, or do we just want to scratch the surface? I thought you guys wanted to get into this. All right. Anyone else want to give their final thoughts on the Mystery Man before we go?
I just thought he was like the revenge part of Fred's life, like the back of his mind that kind of was just egging him on to do things. That's how I took it. I didn't really, I didn't get as deep as you did as far as like a shade, but maybe he is just a shade. Maybe it is just part of his psyche showing him things that, hey, go ahead, do this, get your vengeance. Maybe you're justified, even though you're probably not.
Bri, anything you want to say before we go? I still can't reconcile the fucking Dick Laurent is dead at the start of the movie. That's the most difficult part to make this whole thing work the way I want it to work. But I still do. I'm like, talk, Bri, then I talk. I'm still under the contention that it's very Jacob's Ladder. Like, this whole thing is happening in the span of very short amount of time.
But maybe it is like a predestined, you're about to bring your own doom type of thing, where it's more metaphorical than actual reality, to where the seed of doubt is sown into his mind by himself.
Yeah, because it opens with Dick Laurent is dead. Then it goes into, I had a horrible dream. Yeah, that horrible dream is you fucking killed your wife because you did. Do you see what I'm saying? And then it kind of just plays from there all out across, and then it warps through like his Pete manifestation and everything else. But
think about it as if this movie went 15 minutes longer and he wakes
I kind of do feel that way a tiny bit.
And he didn't kill his wife, and it was all just a fleeting thought about what he wanted to do. Like that's why a movie like this is like, it's so difficult. Like, David Lynch can basically, he can say whatever he wants about his movies because they're so open to interpretation that you can be like, yeah, no, I can see that. I get it. I get where you're coming from.
But we can't. But can I just say this real quick? Yeah. We can't say the movie ended 15 minutes earlier because it in fact didn't, unless we are in a David Lynch movie.
No, of course.
We can only go on what we have.
Right. And what we have, I think,
fucking
is
cough drops. I hear him crunching them.
Fuck you.
The fucking kids eating skiing halls.
I'm
like
trying
Tic-Tacs.
so hard to just survive the last couple of minutes.
So
we gotta
sorry,
wrap this
Bri.
up. We're getting too long. We gotta wrap it up. But go ahead.
Okay.
Bri.
No, what I was going to say is I feel like part of the film it's that's super interesting to me. The best part of it really is exactly what's happened tonight, is that I've changed my mind like 7 times while just talking to you guys about this movie because there's so many different ways to interpret it. And yeah, if the movie went on 5 minutes longer, or if it started 5 minutes earlier, you could have a totally different interpretation as to like what was going on in the movie. In terms of the Mystery Man specifically,
Or whatever. Say whatever you want to say. You don't have to be under my fucking rule. However,
that's
you want to
right.
wrap your
I'm
thoughts.
not going to be under your rule. I think that this fucking movie rules, and that I really fucking enjoy this movie, and I'm glad for all the different perspectives that I've gotten on it through just talking to you guys about it, because like I've interpreted this movie in at least, God, I've seen the movie like a dozen times. I've probably interpreted it like 10 different ways. And the main point, the sticking point with this movie is what's reality and what's not. I think that's the most interesting point, is like what's real and what's not. And I think that I've generally come around at this point to thinking that most of it's not real. That's my most recent viewing of it, is that most of it's not real. It's an interpretation. We're mostly looking through Fred's perspective. There are definitely glimpses into other people's perspectives, but it's mostly just Fred's perspective on a series of events that, and this is something that was actually brought to my attention tonight, is a relatively short period of time. We're talking about like 2 days plus a couple of hours. You might do a little bit of jump forward in terms of like trial time to get a person executed, but
death row time for sure.
Death row time, right? But like, I think that the end of the movie, like the last 2/3, it's that Jacob's ladder thing that you were saying. It's like it happens in a matter of seconds.
So
like the electricity starts, he has the experience, and then he dies.
The question of what is real is interesting, because then again, what is reality? Just because somebody, if it's real to you, if it's real to Fred, then it is a version of reality because it exists, even if it exists only in his head. And that's the kind of
Maaja,
shit that I
you got
love
the shrooms,
Lynch.
dude.
I think, therefore I am.
That's the kind of shit that Lynch is so masterful at doing, and I love him for that. I love this movie. I love that he's making us ask all these questions and still have no definitive answers.
But to piggyback off that point, if I may, it's very important sometimes for us to go, who cares what's real and what isn't? What is the story that is trying to be told?
Right.
That's that's really where the artistry comes together. Yes, it's cool to understand interpretively, like, wow, is this a movie about a guy who like the man dangling at the end of the rope, is this is what happens, and this is really what is the story about? Is the story about the fragility of our egos? Is it about how deep insecurity can really fuck us up? Are we seeing a weird narcissism within this man who is either the hero or the victim in his own fucking brain all the time? What does it mean? What does that matter? And how does it, what is the tale that is told at the end of the day? We shouldn't be going, is this real? Is it fiction? We should be going, what did we get from it? We got from it that you can't allow this type of, and maybe Fred was a lost cause because his brain chemistry is fucked, but we can't allow ourselves to be driven to these lengths based off of our inability to confront certain realities, to where we have to cook up fantasies around all of this other shit. You know what I'm saying? And I think that's really what it comes down to. It's a failure of a relationship. It's a failure of a man to be a fucking man. Scott, can you please give me a dissertation from the middle 45 minutes forward? We'll wait.
I could. I've just been listening to you guys. You guys like this movie way more than I do, I'll be honest. Yeah. I don't like sitting down and having to fucking sit and like figure out what's real, what's not. Give me like a clean movie. I know Lynch is great and people love him, but sometimes I'm like, he's very highfalutin a lot of times, especially in this to me. But I mean, a good movie. It was thought provoking, but like you guys know way more about it than I do. I watched it like 4 times and I still didn't see a lot of the stuff you guys did, which is great because I have a different opinion on this movie. Because I initially watched it and I was like, I don't know. I don't get what everyone likes it about, because I haven't seen it since I was younger. And now I'm like, I could see it, but I'm like, I don't. My biggest problem with a lot of movies is if I have to watch you multiple times, you've lost me. And this is a movie I would have to watch multiple times to kind of get. So, but yeah, no, I've been listening and paying attention.
So you would admit you can't, this just isn't your wheelhouse, like Mind Benders.
Yeah, no, definitely not.
What about
and
something
so like that's,
well, go ahead.
I mean, I can get into them, but it's not what I would watch because there's no clear, I mean, I guess maybe the part of my brain that has like the ADD needs like a clear beginning, middle, and end,
Don't
resolution
put this on
at
your
the
fucking
end.
disease.
Do you know what I mean? Or just my
It's
mind
time
in
for you
general.
to spread your wings, pal.
I am. I definitely am.
I'm just fucking with you, Scott.
But like, I struggle with movies that have to be, every moment has to be interpreted to make it make sense.
At least you don't struggle with breathing.
Oh,
Yeah,
stop.
no, I got
Poor
that.
Brian.
You're so
Jesus
mean.
Christ, dude. Is he okay?
Can you hear me?
Do you
I
have
thought that my
pneumonia?
noise gate was good.
It's not that good. It's not COVID wing good.
He's doing all right over there, though.
I can't. I want to
trying
make sure
hard.
he's good.
I'm trying hard.
No, man, you got to drink a bunch of water. We got to get you on some vitamins, buddy. We're going to take care of you. We're going to put a little pillow under your feet. We got to get you straightened out. Anyway.
Let Scott finish while I die.
Yeah, please do.
No, I was just saying, it's like this. Listening to you guys break this down has opened my eyes to some of the way this movie's supposed to go. But in the same breath, it doesn't need to go anywhere. It could all be fake. It could all be real. It doesn't. And that's the problem I have with it. Is it's like, what's the purpose of the movie?
That's my point. Don't get hung up on that. That's what I was kind of saying.
It's really hard for me though, because you spend a lifetime watching movies a certain way, and this is different. And so like, it's out of my wheelhouse. It's not that I don't get it, because I definitely get what's going on. But it's like, in the same breath, it's not an ideal movie for me, because it's like everything's could be this or that or this or that, and that's not how I work. But I love them. I did enjoy watching it. It's beautiful. It has a great soundtrack. It's everyone is very well acted. It's just the context is a little off for me.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I feel like you don't necessarily have to try to figure this out, because you can just get on the ride and enjoy the atmosphere, the eeriness. The music is fantastic, and just the way it's shot, the cinematography is so beautiful, and it just. I definitely, the first times I saw this movie, had no fucking clue what was going on. I'm just lulled into this like, oh, it's so creepy but so soothing at the same time. Lynch is so good at that. Like the combination of like something is dreadful and eerie and horrible things are about to happen, but I still feel like a weird sense of peace, like a soothing sense of comfort. And this movie does that same thing, and I watched it several times being just like, no idea what's happening, but cool. I love it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then now,
I think a lot of people were like that when it first came out.
Yeah. And then, but I also I enjoy the challenge of like, okay, let's get into it. Let's figure out what's going on. Let's break it down. And I like that. I like the like brain exercise, but I definitely understand why it's not for everybody to do that, to watch movies like that.
Yeah.
That's totally my Lynch feel. Is like I said at the top, I didn't necessarily enjoy it as much as I used to, and it's not to say that I don't still love the film. It's more that like in the past, I enjoyed the intellectual challenge of going into a Lynch film and being like, I know I'm going into something that like is going to be such a mind fuck that it's going to be a puzzle. It's almost like a video game. Like I have to solve this movie as opposed to just watch this movie
Instead of enjoying it.
Right.
Definitely. That's the problem I had. I was because we break down movies, obviously, and we try to figure them out. And doing that is hard for a movie that doesn't really have a clear kind of, it has a story going through it, but it could be interpreted 400 different ways. So I was like, I struggled a little bit. But.
Not even really, Scott. Like this movie does not have a solution. Like there is no clear answer, and he is unwilling to give it. So,
and I think this gets back to Maaja was saying, you kind of just feel the coziness and embrace it. And she's absolutely right up until you have to podcast about it. Because then Scott gets put in a position where he's like, I could just watch this and enjoy and go like, wow, just for the visceral visuals of like Arquette walking around and the music. Jesus Christ, this is so visually compelling. But then you're like, well, what does it fucking mean? And then you're doing a podcast. You got to get into what does it mean? And it's funny,
and all those things you just mentioned were great. Like it's beautifully shot. Everyone does a great job acting. Patricia Arquette is beautiful. It's phenomenal. It's got an eeriness I loved. Again, the soundtrack is phenomenal. I had the soundtrack before I ever saw the movie.
Me too.
Yeah, because it was just like, Marilyn Manson, Smashing Pumpkins, like Rammstein, like all this stuff. So. But go ahead. What were you saying? I'm sorry.
What I was going to say was that it is yes, when you podcast, there's a certain responsibility to get into the minutia a little bit, and that can take away your enjoyment from all movies. When you podcast about movies, sometimes you will enjoy them less than you do normally. I find sometimes that when I am forced to think, like I watched Lost Highway back in the day, and I was like, cool, I dig it, but kind of up your own ass, like trying to be a smart guy. Now I watch it, and because I had to it's funny, I had an inverse reaction to Brian, who enjoys it less. I enjoy it a little more because I was forced to try to interpret it. Now, Brian has tried to interpret it or has interpreted it in the past, whereas I didn't. I just watched it, went cool, went on with my life. Like a non-podcaster might, like Scott might enjoy it more, right? This time, I actually enjoyed it more because I got into it more. But my ADD is hyperfixation. Like, I'm like, oh, this cool game I want to learn. Now I've built 40 decks for it, and I really get it, and now I enjoy it fully. Whereas, do you see what I'm saying? So for me, yours is the other way.
More opposite.
yours goes the other way. You ping pong around, right?
Yep.
I'm like, oh, now that I understand this movie more, I really like it a lot more. But also, and I love Lynch, but also kind of fuck you. Like, come on, bro. Well, kind of fuck you.
Yeah,
but it is brilliant, I will say. And it's the one thing I like about Lynch is the same thing I like about a lot of guys who, and this is a rare quality, I guess I could say, but I like that it's unique. It's very difficult to tell a story uniquely. To be like, look at this movie, and you go, this is unlike other movies, period. And that's
agree.
cool. That's artistic. That's trying something new with the, no more boomer bends. Let's play fucking weird polyphonic shit. People are taking the instrument to the next level. They're trying new shit. They're trying new shit with the guitar. They're trying new shit with movies. So I appreciate that about it. I'm glad it exists, and I actually do really like it. I like it a lot. I'd watch it again. Whereas Scott might be like, yeah, I'm good.
I think I'm good.
No, I also like that. Like I was saying, it's kind of like. It was a test balloon for Mulholland Drive, which is another very, very good movie. But I kind of think this movie is more pure in a certain sense. I was actually, of course, reading a little bit about it, going into researching this pod. But like Mulholland Drive and Inland Empire, which were his next two films, they were both supposed to be television shows. And they kind of got cut down and just turned into movies, where this was like his pure vision of this thought process, so to speak. And regardless of how confusing the film can come off, I think that it is a complete story and it is a complete thought process, where I think that Mulholland Drive is less so. And perhaps we'll talk about it in the future, and we can go into that if that comes about. But
yeah, we've done it in the past. It's on the feed somewhere. I think Matt and I did it.
Oh,
I'm not saying I wouldn't do it again. But
I probably listened to it. But what I'm saying is I think that this movie, the reason why I love it so much and why I insisted on being a part of it, because I fucking love it.
Or did we just say, hey, do you want to be on this?
Stop.
I injected a little bit. It was like, hey, I see you guys doing Lost Highway. I love this movie so much.
Yeah. I'm like, I get it. Oh my God. Can you just speak directly to me instead of being a fucking woman?
No, but
Jesus, just talk directly to me.
I understand
Why
that.
don't you be more Alice and less Renee?
Fucking A. Be more Pete and less Fred. Wait, never mind. They both stink.
Yep.
There's a reason why I went with the women, Dean. Come on.
Yeah, you're good. Much better characters.
Stop.
Much better characters. Anyway, good times. We're out of here. Thank you very much. We appreciate the continued support. Of course, shout out to Bill. We're shouting Bill out at the top of this anyway. So, yeah, that's it. We've had a ton of fun with this. Thank you so much, Brian. Hope to see you a little bit more in the future, assuming we get over that cough. And you
boy.
don't end up on fucking Boot Hill with fucking Doc Holliday.
Rest up.
And that's it. Much love, much love. You guys are the best. And we will be back in a week's time. We're kind of up in the air on what we might be doing. So stand by. Stand down. Stand by. Okay? Much love. Bye.